Every month, a stranger sent me $10,000 for 5 years, but I never knew who he was. Then one day his lawyer called and said he had passed away, leaving me his entire $50 million fortune. When I asked why, the answer left me speechless. My name is Sloan and I am 27 years old. I am a forensic accountant, a financial predator who hunts down corporate fraud and destroys tax evaders for a living. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth and threw you to the wolves. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, my family was obsessed with status, wealth, and the illusion of absolute perfection. My parents, Donovan and Sylvia, built a highly profitable commercial real estate firm. They were ruthless in business and even colder at home. But their demanding expectations did not apply to my older sister, Penelope. She was their undisputed golden child, pampered, praised, and heavily funded. I was just the quiet, analytical younger daughter, tolerated only as long as I made myself useful. When I was 22, I was working as a junior accounting intern at my father's firm, trying to earn the respect that Penelope received simply for breathing. Penelope had recently gotten engaged to DeAndre, a charismatic, sharp-dressing Black African-American tech founder. My parents practically worshipped the ground DeAndre walked on. He was building a supposedly revolutionary software startup, and Donovan and Sylvia loved parading him around their country club dinners, eager to associate our family name with a rising Silicon Valley star. They threw open doors and wrote blank checks for him, ignoring every logical red flag. The catalyst for my complete destruction and eventual rebirth happened on a freezing rain-soaked Tuesday night in November. I had stayed late at the corporate office, reconciling the quarterly accounts for my father's primary investment fund. I was meticulously running the numbers when I noticed something glaringly wrong. A massive, inexplicable hole in the ledger. Exactly $200,000 had been quietly siphoned from the main corporate account. It was expertly masked through a complex series of dummy shell companies and fake vendor invoices, but numbers do not lie. I am good at what I do, and I followed the digital paper trail straight through their weak firewalls. The money led directly to DeAndre's startup accounts, and the transfers had been authorized using Penelope's executive security credentials. They were stealing from my parents, bleeding the family business dry to fund DeAndre's lavish lifestyle and keep his failing tech venture afloat. I immediately printed the ledgers, packed the evidence into my briefcase, and drove straight to my parents' estate. I found them all gathered in my father's mahogany-paneled home office. Donovan, Sylvia, Penelope, and DeAndre were drinking scotch and laughing. I slammed the financial reports onto my father's desk, expecting outrage. I expected Donovan to call the police and throw DeAndre out. Instead, they turned their collective fury on me. Donovan's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. He did not look at the ledgers. He looked at me with pure venom. He accused me of hacking the internal system to frame my sister. Sylvia stood behind him, her arms tightly crossed, glaring at me with absolute disgust. She called me a jealous, pathetic failure. She claimed I was trying to ruin Penelope's perfect engagement because I was an ugly dropout who could not find a successful man of my own. DeAndre stood by the fireplace, swirling his scotch with a calm, arrogant smirk. He smoothly stepped in, lying straight to my parents' faces. He claimed the $200,000 was an approved, unrecorded seed investment handled quietly for tax benefits. It was a blatant illegal lie, a textbook case of corporate embezzlement. My father grabbed a heavy fountain pen and shoved it into my hand. "Fix the numbers, Sloan," he commanded, his voice dripping with menace. "Doctor the accounting records. Hide the transfer right now, or you are no longer a part of this family." I looked at the pen in my trembling hand. I looked at my mother's sneering face and my sister's triumphant smile. I dropped the pen onto the hardwood floor. I told them I would never commit corporate fraud to protect a con artist. The reaction was violent and immediate. Donovan grabbed my arm, his grip bruising my skin, and dragged me out of the office. Sylvia followed, gathering my raincoat and my small duffel bag from the hallway closet. She threw my belongings out onto the front porch into the pouring rain. They shoved me out into the bitter cold of the Chicago autumn night. "Failures do not sleep under my roof," my father shouted. "Do not ever show your face here again." He slammed the heavy oak door, the deadbolt clicking loudly over the crash of thunder. I had exactly $50 in my pocket. My credit cards were tied to the family accounts, which Donovan deactivated within minutes. I walked 3 miles through the freezing rain, my clothes soaked to the bone, until I reached the local Walmart parking lot, where my beat-up Honda Civic was parked. I locked the car doors, curled into a tight ball on the back seat, and pulled my wet coat over my head for warmth. I cried until my chest burned, unable to comprehend how the people who were supposed to protect me could discard me like trash. The betrayal cut much deeper than the freezing cold. I spent the entire night shivering and wide awake, watching the rain hammer against the windshield, calculating how I was going to survive with no home, no money, and no family. At exactly 6 in the morning, the gray light filtering through the fogged windows, my phone buzzed on the dashboard. I grabbed it, expecting a cruel message from Penelope. Instead, it was an alert from my personal banking app. An incoming wire transfer had cleared. I opened the app, my numb fingers struggling to type the passcode. My balance, which had been dangerously close to zero, now read $10,000. I stared at the screen, rubbing my eyes, convinced I was hallucinating from exhaustion. It was an anonymous international wire. Attached to the digital transaction was a single cryptic memo line. It simply read, "For your integrity. See you at the finish line." My heart raced as I tried to process what this meant. Who knew what had transpired in my father's office? Who knew I had chosen the truth over my family? I had absolutely no answers, but that cold morning, an invisible stranger saved my life, and he did not stop there. On the first day of every month for the next 5 years, without fail, another $10,000 dropped into my account. That silent, anonymous lifeline allowed me to finish my forensic accounting degree, rent a secure apartment, and ultimately build my own independent investigation firm from the ground up. I turned my trauma into a weapon, becoming a ruthless auditor. But I never touched that monthly wire money, stockpiling every cent into a secure offshore account while I hunted desperately for the identity of my ghost benefactor. I had no idea that finding him would hand me the keys to legally obliterate the very people who threw me into the rain. 5 years is a long time to live with a ghost. Today I am 27 years old. I sit behind a massive slab of tempered glass in my corner office on the 42nd floor, overlooking the freezing skyline of downtown Chicago. I am no longer the terrified 22-year-old girl shivering in the back of a damp Honda Civic. I am the founder and lead investigator of Vanguard Financial Forensics. In the corporate world, my name is a weapon. I am the auditor that board members pray never walks through their doors. I rip apart falsified ledgers, dismantle offshore tax evasion schemes, and send white-collar criminals to federal prison. My daily routine consists of dissecting corporate lies and destroying the men who tell them. I built this agency on a foundation of absolute ruthlessness. I do not deal in emotions. I deal in hard, undeniable mathematics. But there is one mathematical anomaly I have never been able to solve. I open a highly encrypted, secure browser on my secondary monitor. I type in a sequence of 32 alphanumeric characters and pass 3 biometric security checks. The screen loads a private offshore bank account based in the Cayman Islands. The balance reads exactly $600,000, 60 months, 60 wire transfers of exactly $10,000 each. The deposits always hit at exactly 6 in the morning on the first day of every month. I have never spent a single cent of that money. Instead, I treated it like a crime scene. I applied every elite forensic tracing software my agency possesses to hunt down the source. I followed the digital breadcrumbs through shell companies in Delaware, phantom LLCs in Cyprus, and blind trusts in the British Virgin Islands. Every single time I hit a dead end, a solid digital brick wall. The sender was a phantom with resources that vastly outmatched my own. I kept the money locked away, treating it as a contingency fund for a rainy day that I hoped would never come. My discipline in ignoring that wealth is what kept me sharp and hungry. The absolute silence of my office is suddenly broken by the sharp ring of my private secure line. Only 3 people in the entire world have this particular number. I glance at the caller ID on my desk monitor. It displays a blocked unknown origin. My forensic instincts instantly put me on high alert. I press a silver button on my console and activate the agency call trace protocol before picking up the receiver. Sloan speaking, I say, keeping my voice perfectly flat and professional. Madam Chairwoman, a deep, gravelly voice replies. The tone is formal, completely devoid of warmth. My name is Gideon Reed. I am the senior managing partner at Reed & Associates and the primary executor of the Thorne estate. I pause, my fingers hovering over my keyboard. I run a quick mental scan of my current target list. I do not know any Gideon Reed, and I certainly do not know any Thorne estate. You have the wrong number, Mr. Reed, I reply. I do not represent any client by that name. I move to end the call. Do not hang up, the voice commands with sudden sharp authority. I am not calling regarding your client, Sloan. I am calling regarding your personal assets, specifically the recurring monthly deposits of $10,000 that you have been receiving for the past 5 years. My blood turns to absolute ice. The trace protocol on my computer screen flashes red, indicating the origin of the call is heavily encrypted and bouncing off local towers. I stand up from my ergonomic desk, my heart hammering against my ribs. Who are you? I demand, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. How do you know about those private wires? I know because I am the one who orchestrated the routing on behalf of my client, Gideon replies smoothly. His name was Victor Thorne. He was a private real estate magnate based right here in Chicago. I say was because Mr. Thorne passed away entirely unexpectedly at 2:00 this morning. I stare out the window at the gray storm clouds rolling over the steel skyscrapers. Victor Thorne. I repeat the name silently, testing the syllables. I have memorized the rosters of every major real estate player in the Midwest. Victor Thorne is a ghost, a total recluse. I have never met him. I have never audited his businesses. I have never even heard his name in passing. I do not know Victor Thorne, I say firmly. Why would a billionaire I have never met send me $600,000 over 5 years? Mr. Thorne was an intensely private man, Gideon answers. He operated through proxies and silent partnerships. The monthly stipend was merely a retainer, a down payment for your absolute integrity, as he preferred to call it. He watched your career develop with great interest, Sloan. He admired your complete refusal to bend your morals for anyone. A down payment, for what? I ask, my grip tightening on the phone receiver. For today, Gideon says. Mr. Thorne had no living heirs. He had no wife and no children. In his final will and testament, executed legally and securely stored in my vault, he named you as the sole beneficiary of his entire corporate holding and personal wealth. I stop breathing. The silence in my office becomes deafening. I press my free hand against the icy glass of the window, grounding myself in the cold reality of the pain. What exactly are you saying, Gideon? I am saying that as of 2:00 this morning, you inherited an estate valued at roughly $50 million, Gideon states. His voice does not waver. He delivers the life-altering news with the clinical precision of a man reading a daily grocery list. You are now the sole owner of Thorne Vanguard. $50 million. The massive number echoes in my head. I am a woman who dissects vast wealth for a living, but this figure paralyzes me. I have built my entire agency on logic, but there is absolutely no logic in a stranger handing over an empire of this magnitude. Why me? I ask, my voice barely a breath in the quiet room. What did he want from me in return? He wanted you to do exactly what you do best, Sloan. He wanted you to wage war, Gideon replies. But we cannot discuss the specifics over an unsecured cellular network. You must come to my office immediately. The transition of power was supposed to remain sealed for 48 hours, but there has been a massive security breach. A security breach, I repeat, my forensic instincts immediately snapping back into place. Victor Thorne had enemies. Gideon warns, his tone dropping into a low, urgent register. Very powerful, very desperate former business associates. Word of his death leaked an hour ago. These individuals believe they are entitled to his fortune. They believe they can pressure the estate into liquidating the assets in their favor. They are currently mobilizing to intercept the reading of the will and dispute the inheritance. Let them try, I say, my voice hardening into solid steel. I handle desperate, fraudulent executives every single day of the week. You do not understand the severity of this situation, Sloan Gideon presses. These associates are relentless and they have nothing left to lose. They are on their way to my building right now to crash the reading and seize control of the boardroom. If you are not sitting in the primary executive chair when they arrive, they will file an emergency injunction to freeze the $50 million indefinitely. Give me the address, I command, grabbing my sleek black wool coat from the back of my door. Gideon rattles off an address in the financial district. It is less than a 10-minute walk from my current location. I memorize the suite number and the specific floor. I will be there in 8 minutes, I tell him. Have your security clear the elevators. Do not delay, Madam Chairwoman, Gideon says before the line goes dead. I throw my phone into my leather briefcase and grab my encrypted hard drives. $50 million. An anonymous benefactor named Victor Thorne. A sudden death and a swarm of hostile business associates closing in on the money. I do not believe in fairy tales, and I certainly do not believe in free money. Every dollar comes with a heavy blood price. I lock my office door behind me, my mind calculating 100 different defensive strategies. I step onto the executive elevator and hit the button for the lobby. I am ready to face whoever these hostile associates are. I am ready to tear them apart with the same ruthless precision I apply to my corporate targets. I march out of my building and into the biting Chicago wind, heading straight for the impending war. The biting Chicago wind whips against my wool coat as I cross the financial district, my mind racing with the tactical implications of Victor Thorne's death. I step through the revolving glass doors of the Reed and Associates building, trading the freezing storm for the hushed, climate-controlled opulence of the marble lobby. I flash my credentials to the front desk security, bypass the visitor log, and step into the private express elevator. The polished steel doors slide shut, and the high-speed ascent to the 42nd floor begins. I use these brief seconds to compartmentalize my shock. I am no longer a bewildered heir. I am a forensic auditor walking into a hostile takeover. The elevator chimes a soft melodic note. The doors glide open, revealing an expansive reception area drenched in natural light, featuring imported Italian marble floors and sleek leather seating. And there they are. 5 years have passed since that freezing night in the rain, but the toxic energy radiating from the seating area is exactly the same. Sitting in the center of the plush waiting room are Donovan, Sylvia, Penelope, and DeAndre. My blood runs cold for a fraction of a second, but my training takes over instantly. I do not freeze. I observe. I analyze. My forensic eye automatically scans them, dissecting their appearances like a fraudulent corporate ledger. Donovan paces the marble floor wearing his signature bespoke suit, but the fabric is slightly worn at the elbows, and his posture carries a desperate manic tension. Sylvia sits rigidly on a white leather sofa draped in a heavy mink coat that looks entirely out of place for a corporate law firm, her hands gripping her designer handbag so tightly her knuckles are white. Penelope is frantically checking her reflection in her phone screen, dripping in excessive diamond jewelry that screams of financial insecurity. DeAndre leans against the reception desk, projecting an aura of smug Silicon Valley arrogance, though the gold watch on his wrist is 2 seasons old. They are projecting wealth, but I can smell the desperation from across the room. Donovan is speaking loudly, making sure the terrified receptionist hears every word of his fabricated triumph. He brags to DeAndre that Victor Thorne, his oldest and most bitter real estate rival, has finally caved. Donovan claims Victor realized the error of his ways and is using his dying breath to issue a posthumous apology by handing over the Thorne estate. They are utterly convinced that they are the sole beneficiaries called up here to receive the crown jewels of a conquered enemy. I take a calm, measured step out of the elevator bay. The sound of my practical weatherproof boots clicking against the marble echoes through the vast space. Penelope turns her head at the sound. Her perfectly contoured face registers a split second of absolute shock before twisting into a familiar, cruel sneer. She nudges her husband. "Well, look what the cat dragged in from the rain," Penelope announces, her voice piercing the quiet elegance of the lobby. The entire family turns to face me. Donovan stops pacing, his eyes narrowing with immediate disdain. Sylvia physically recoils, clutching her fur coat tighter as if my mere presence might contaminate her. I stop walking, leaving 10 feet of polished marble between us. I keep my posture perfectly straight, my hands relaxed at my sides and my face an unreadable mask of ice. DeAndre pushes himself off the reception desk and takes a step forward, looking me up and down with profound amusement. He zeroes in on my stark black coat and simple boots, completely misreading the situation. "Are you lost, Sloane?" DeAndre asks, his tone dripping with condescension. "Or did you finally manage to get a job as a lowly legal courier? I thought you would at least be managing a strip mall tax kiosk by now." "Nice shoes, by the way. Very practical for fetching coffee." Sylvia lets out a sharp, elitist scoff. She waves a dismissive hand in my direction. "They must have sent her up here from the mailroom to deliver the will," she says to Donovan. "Just ignore her. Make sure you do not smudge the legal documents, dear. We have very important family business to conclude today." Penelope laughs loudly, a shrill and grating sound that grates against the sophisticated acoustics of the room. The ugly dropout is still running errands for the adults, Penelope mocks, stepping closer to DeAndre and wrapping her arm around his waist. "Maybe if you fetch Gideon his coffee fast enough, he will give you a $5 tip. You can use it to buy a new coat." I do not flinch. I do not offer a single word of defense. I let their insults hang in the air, pathetic and hollow. Their arrogance is a fragile shield, and I am already calculating the exact trajectory of their impending ruin. I simply maintain my deadpan stare, locking eyes with my father. Donovan glares back, his jaw set with the same tyrannical anger he displayed 5 years ago, silently daring me to speak. Before the toxic silence can stretch any further, the heavy, frosted glass doors to the inner executive sanctum swing open. Gideon Reed steps into the lobby. He is an imposing figure, a silver-haired legal titan exuding absolute authority. He is flanked by 2 massive private security contractors wearing dark suits and earpieces. Donovan immediately breaks eye contact with me and lunges forward. He plasters on a fake, overly familiar smile and forcefully extends his right hand toward the lawyer. "Gideon, it is fantastic to see you," Donovan booms, projecting the false confidence of a conquering king. "We are ready to accept Victor's apology. Just point me to the transfer documents and we can get this old rivalry settled once and for all." Gideon does not slow his pace. He does not reach out. He walks directly past Donovan, completely ignoring the outstretched hand, treating the patriarch of my family as if he is nothing more than a minor architectural obstruction in the lobby. Gideon marches straight across the marble floor and stops exactly 2 feet in front of me. The imposing lawyer bows his head in a gesture of profound respect and extends a steady, welcoming hand. Madame Chairwoman Gideon states, his deep voice carrying flawlessly across the dead silent lobby. "Thank you for arriving so quickly. The executive boardroom is prepared for you. The shift in the room is instantaneous and violently absolute." Donovan's extended hand drops to his side, his face draining of all color. Sylvia gasps out loud, her hand flying to her throat. DeAndre's smug, arrogant smile completely vanishes, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. Penelope literally chokes on her own breath, her eyes bulging as she stares at Gideon, bowing to the sister she just called an errand girl. I reach out and firmly shake Gideon's hand. "Lead the way, Gideon," I say, my voice steady and commanding. I step past the lawyer, walking purposefully toward the frosted glass doors of the boardroom. I do not cast a single glance backward at the 4 statues of shock standing in the lobby. "Wait, what is the meaning of this?" Donovan suddenly roars, his voice cracking with panicked outrage as he tries to charge forward. "You cannot bring her in there. We are the beneficiaries." Gideon turns smoothly, blocking Donovan's path. He looks at the 2 massive security guards flanking the entrance. "This will reading is highly classified." Gideon orders, his tone lethally calm. Keep these unauthorized individuals outside. If they attempt to cause a disturbance, forcefully remove them from the premises. I stepped through the glass doors, leaving my paralyzed family stranded in the lobby, trapped on the wrong side of the glass, while I walked directly into my empire. The heavy frosted glass doors of the executive boardroom glide shut behind me, sealing out the chaotic noise of the lobby. I walk toward the massive, polished mahogany table that dominates the center of the room. The air smells of rich leather lemon oil and quiet absolute power. I take my seat in the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table, folding my hands, resting them on the cool wood. Gideon takes his place to my right, opening a thick leather-bound folio. The profound silence lasts for exactly 10 seconds before all hell breaks loose. A violent crash echoes through the room as the frosted doors shudder on their tracks. Donovan violently forces his way into the boardroom, shoving past the two massive security contractors. His face is a dangerous shade of crimson veins bulging visibly against his collar. Sylvia, Penelope, and DeAndre squeeze through the breach right behind him, riding the wake of his aggressive intrusion. The security guards immediately step forward, reaching for Donovan's shoulders to physically restrain him, but Gideon raises a single calm hand. The guards pause, stepping back just enough to let the spectacle unfold. Donovan slams his fists down on the far end of the mahogany table. He is practically foaming at the mouth, demanding to know what kind of sick joke is being played. He roars that Victor Thorne was his oldest and most bitter rival. He insists that he was summoned here to receive his rightful payout, a posthumous apology from a defeated enemy. He points a shaking finger directly at me, demanding to know why a total stranger, a girl who was kicked out of his house 5 years ago, is sitting in the executive chair, taking what legally belongs to his family. Gideon does not even blink at the outburst. He completely ignores Donovan's screaming. The estate lawyer casually adjusts his silver reading glasses, looks down at the open folio, and begins to read the last will and testament of Victor Thorne aloud. His deep, resonant voice cuts through the lingering echoes of Donovan's rage. Gideon reads the stipulations with clinical legal precision. He details the vast scope of the estate, the liquid assets, the real estate portfolios, and the holding companies. Then he reaches the execution clause. Gideon announces that Victor Thorne leaves his entire $50 million fortune and his absolute controlling interest in all corporate holdings to one sole beneficiary, Sloan. Donovan is instantly paralyzed. The color rapidly drains from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. His jaw works soundlessly as his brain fails to process the magnitude of the loss. Gideon does not pause to let them breathe. He reaches into the leather folio and pulls out a single unmarked sealed manila envelope. He slides it smoothly across the long polished table. It glides over the mahogany, stopping exactly at Donovan's fingertips. Gideon looks my father dead in the eye and announces that this envelope is the sole inheritance left to Donovan and Sylvia. There is no money, there are no corporate shares, there are no apologies. There is just that sealed piece of paper. Penelope completely loses her mind. The illusion of her high society composure shatters in an instant. She throws a massive, humiliating tantrum right there on the imported rugs of the executive boardroom. She stomps her expensive designer heels, screaming that this has to be a mistake. Her face turns blotchy and red as she grabs DeAndre's arm, shaking him frantically. She hysterically demands that DeAndre call his high-powered tech lawyers right this second to contest the will. She shrieks at the top of her lungs, accusing me of manipulating a dying elderly man to steal her luxury lifestyle. DeAndre, however, does not move a single muscle. His signature arrogance has completely vanished. He looks terrified. His eyes dart nervously toward Gideon and the security guards. He is a fraud, running a failing startup, and he knows perfectly well that his cheap lawyers cannot touch a legal titan like Gideon Reed. DeAndre slowly pulls his arm out of Penelope's frantic grip, taking a cautious step backward, distancing himself from her meltdown. Sylvia assesses the room with the speed of a cornered predator. She watches Penelope's hysterical screaming. She looks at Donovan's catatonic shock, and then she looks at the $50 million, effectively sitting in front of me. In a heartbeat, Sylvia completely abandons her husband's outrage and her daughter's tantrum. She immediately switches tactics, deploying a sickeningly sweet display of maternal affection. Sylvia rushes forward down the length of the boardroom, her face twisting into a mask of tearful, overwhelming joy. She throws her arms open, attempting to pull me into a tight, desperate hug. She loudly proclaims that she always knew I was destined for greatness. She calls me her brilliant daughter, weeping fake tears of pride and insisting that this inheritance is a beautiful victory for our entire family. She babbles about how we can finally put the past behind us and build our new empire together. I do not flinch. I do not reciprocate the embrace. I sit perfectly still, letting her manic energy crash against my absolute indifference. I stand up slowly, forcing Sylvia to take an awkward step back. My expression is carved from solid ice. I look down at her manicured hands, clutching the sleeve of my coat, and I casually brush them off as if flicking away dust. I turn my gaze to the massive security contractors waiting silently by the glass doors. I give them a single sharp nod. Remove these unauthorized individuals from my boardroom. I order, my voice echoing with absolute freezing authority. The guards step forward instantly. They grab Donovan by the shoulders, physically turning the paralyzed man around. Another guard takes Sylvia by the arm, pulling her away from me despite her dramatic protests. Penelope shrieks as a guard directs her and a terrified DeAndre toward the exit. They stumble backward, struggling and shouting as they are forcibly marched out of the room. As they are being dragged backward toward the frosted glass doors, Sylvia screams my name, begging me to listen to reason. I look directly into her panic-stricken eyes, delivering the final devastating blow with chilling clarity. I do not have a family. The heavy glass doors slide shut, sealing them out, and leaving me alone in the quiet, absolute power of my new empire. I stepped out of the black town car and walked into the sleek glass building that housed Vanguard Financial Forensics. The absolute victory in Gideon Reed's boardroom was already categorized and filed away in my mind. I had a $50 million empire to manage now, but my primary concern remained my current caseload. I walked past the rows of frosted glass desks, where my analysts were busy tracing laundered money and corporate theft. The office hummed with the quiet, focused energy of a highly efficient machine. I stepped into my corner office overlooking the Chicago River and sat down behind my desk, ready to resume hunting down financial predators. Barely 2 hours had passed since I watched building security drag my blood relatives out of the marble lobby. I was reviewing a complex offshore tax evasion file when my primary monitor suddenly flickered. A harsh digital stutter ripped across the high-definition display. Then the screen went entirely black. It was not a simple power surge. Within seconds, every single monitor in my office turned a violently bright shade of crimson. A stark white padlock icon materialized in the center of the screens, followed immediately by a scrolling, endless wall of encrypted code. Through the glass walls of my office, I watched my entire floor erupt into sudden confusion. Junior auditors stood up from their desks, pointing frantically at their locked terminals. The secure internal network, the absolute lifeblood of my forensic agency, had been completely hijacked. This was not a standard phishing scam or a generic ransomware bot deployed by low-level hackers. This was a highly targeted military-grade cyber assault. Someone was using an incredibly aggressive backdoor algorithm to brute force their way past our enterprise firewalls. The intruder was moving with terrifying speed, locking down directories, encrypting client vaults, and seizing total control of our digital infrastructure. My private cell phone vibrated violently against the glass surface of my desk. This specific number was unlisted, completely unsearchable, and known only to a handful of elite corporate clients and federal contacts. I looked down at the glowing screen. The caller ID was masked, routing through a dozen different proxy servers, but I already knew exactly who was on the other end of the line. I answered the call and brought the phone to my ear without saying a single word. DeAndre's voice came through the speaker, dripping with a toxic mixture of bruised ego and overwhelming arrogance. He sounded breathless, practically vibrating with malicious excitement. He told me he hoped I liked his little digital light show. He bragged loudly that the expensive security protocols I had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to install were absolutely nothing against his proprietary routing algorithms. He was utilizing the exact same illicit backdoor software that my parents had blindly funded to rip through my agency defenses. DeAndre felt untouchable hiding behind his keyboard. The humiliation he suffered in the law firm lobby had fueled a rapid and vicious retaliation. He did not waste time playing games. He laid out his hostage demands with supreme overconfidence. He had completely locked down every server at Vanguard Financial Forensics. He claimed he had direct, unrestricted access to every single highly classified financial file my agency possessed. The stakes were astronomical. I held the darkest financial secrets of some of the most powerful corporations in the Midwest. DeAndre demanded $25 million. He wanted exactly 50% of Victor Thorne's estate transferred directly into his tech startup's primary operating account by midnight tonight. He demanded that I sign over half my inheritance to save his sinking ship. He made his threat perfectly clear and incredibly vicious. If I did not comply, he would not just wipe my servers clean and destroy my business. DeAndre laughed a cruel, desperate sound that echoed through the phone speaker. He threatened to systematically manipulate the digital ledgers of my biggest corporate clients. He promised to plant highly sophisticated, fabricated evidence that would make it look like I had been embezzling millions from the very companies I was hired to audit. He was going to frame me for federal wire fraud. He told me he would completely destroy my flawless professional reputation, ensure my agency was raided by the FBI, and watch me rot in a federal penitentiary while he and Penelope spent my inheritance. He finished his dramatic ultimatum and waited. He waited for me to beg. He waited for the panic to set in. DeAndre wanted to hear the Ice Queen finally shatter. He wanted me to scream and negotiate and cry just like my mother and sister had done earlier that afternoon. He desperately needed to feel powerful after being so thoroughly discarded. I did not give him a single breath of satisfaction. I sat in my leather chair and listened to his frantic, arrogant breathing over the line. I analyzed the subtle tremor of panic hiding just beneath his aggressive threats. This was not the calculated move of a confident tech genius holding all the cards. This was the desperate thrashing of a drowning man whose massive Ponzi scheme was rapidly running out of cash. He needed that $25 million to cover his tracks, and he was foolish enough to try and extort a forensic auditor to get it. I lowered the phone from my ear. I pressed the red button and ended the call without uttering a single syllable. I turned the phone completely off, removing the battery, and tossed the useless plastic onto my desk. I did not call my IT department. I did not hit the panic alarm to alert the federal authorities. I stood up from my chair and walked calmly to the heavy oak doors of my office. I reached up and pulled the heavy smart blinds shut, completely blocking the view of the chaotic, panicked bullpen outside. I engaged the heavy brass deadbolts, locking myself inside my office. I walked over to the far wall, which was lined entirely with floor-to-ceiling cherry wood bookshelves. I reached behind a heavy leather-bound volume on international tax law and pressed my thumb against a concealed biometric scanner. A small green light flashed in the shadows. The entire massive bookshelf unlatched with a heavy mechanical click and swung outward smoothly on reinforced steel hinges. Hidden directly behind the false wall was a heavily modified climate-controlled server rack. It was completely severed from the outside world. It was a localized air-gapped forensic mainframe powered by its own independent grid. I had built this hidden architecture for exactly this kind of catastrophic doomsday scenario. It was untraceable, unhackable, and loaded with the most aggressive counter-surveillance software available on the black market. I reached forward and flipped the heavy power switches. The isolated servers roared to life instantly, the cooling fans humming with massive computing power. The room bathed in the harsh blue glow of the LED indicators. I pulled up a secondary keyboard, dragged a stool over to the hidden terminal, and cracked my knuckles. DeAndre thought he had cornered me in a hostage situation. He had no idea that I had just locked the doors to ensure he could not escape the absolute digital slaughter I was about to unleash. My fingers fly across the secondary keyboard, bypassing the infected network entirely. The air-gapped terminal responds with lightning speed. I launch a proprietary packet sniffing diagnostic, a custom tool I coded myself for hunting state-sponsored money launderers. DeAndre's ransomware is loud and aggressive, leaving a massive digital wake. He relied on commercial proxy chains, assuming standard enterprise firewalls would just block the assault and lock up. He never anticipated someone capturing the malicious packets and dissecting them in a quarantined sandbox. I isolate the payload string and begin peeling back the encrypted layers. It takes me exactly 4 minutes to reverse engineer his routing protocol. I strip away the decoy servers in Estonia. I bypass the bounced signals pinging off a server farm in Brazil. The trail narrows, pulling straight back to the United States. I run a rapid trace route, watching the glowing nodes on my screen map a direct path to a luxury penthouse in downtown Chicago. DeAndre's personal IP address blinks onto my monitor. He launched a federal cyber attack from his own living room sofa on an unsecured home network. The arrogance is matched only by the sheer, staggering incompetence. I do not simply kill the ransomware process. That would be defensive. I am going on the offensive. Using his open connection as a digital bridge, I send a targeted remote access Trojan straight back down the pipeline. DeAndre's startup firewalls are pathetic. They are off-the-shelf commercial security protocols poorly configured by amateur developers. I slice through them in seconds. I am now inside his personal machine and the central servers of his highly publicized tech company. I bypass the user interfaces and dive straight into the raw database. I am hunting for the master ledgers, the raw financial architecture of his entire operation. I locate a heavily encrypted hidden partition. It takes my forensic decryption software less than 60 seconds to crack the password. The internal corporate ledgers flood my screen, presenting columns of raw data. I am a financial predator, and this is my hunting ground. My eyes scan the numbers, instantly running cross-references and balance checks. The truth jumps off of the screen. DeAndre's revolutionary tech startup has zero legitimate revenue. There are no actual product sales. There are no substantial user subscriptions. The entire company is a hollow shell. The massive influx of capital he boasts about on magazine covers is coming entirely from new rounds of desperate venture capital. He is using fresh investor money to pay off the initial seed funders and cover his extravagant lifestyle. It is a textbook Ponzi scheme structured with the finesse of a desperate amateur. He is burning through cash at a catastrophic rate, and the entire house of cards is weeks away from a total collapse. That is why he needed the $25 million from Victor Thorne's estate. It was a lifeline to keep himself out of federal prison. But the math still does not balance. There is a massive liquidity gap. The startup is bleeding money faster than the venture capitalists are supplying it. Yet DeAndre has managed to avoid defaulting on his operational loans. Something else is keeping the fraud afloat. I launch a deep dive trace on all incoming wire transfers from the past 18 months, specifically targeting untagged capital injections. A sequence of recurring deposits catches my eye. They are massive structured transfers arriving every 2 weeks, carefully kept just under the threshold that would automatically trigger a federal banking audit. I highlight the routing numbers and trace them backward through a maze of dummy corporations. The trail leads offshore, the Cayman Islands. It is a classic laundering tactic, but DeAndre left digital fingerprints everywhere. I crack the offshore account registry and pull the primary ownership records. The names on the source accounts flash across my screen: Donovan and Sylvia. I stop typing. The blue light of the monitor casts a cold shadow across my office. DeAndre is not just a fraud, he is a parasite. For the last year and a half, he has been systematically draining my parents' primary retirement funds. He has been siphoning off their life savings, liquidating their hard assets, and funneling the cash through the Caymans directly into his failing startup. Donovan and Sylvia think their son-in-law is a brilliant billionaire. They have no idea he has robbed them blind to keep his Ponzi scheme alive. He has financially gutted my family while sleeping under their roof, eating at their table, and accepting their praise. My shock instantly hardens into lethal clarity. I open a secure extraction protocol on my terminal. I select the master ledgers showing the Ponzi scheme architecture. I select the offshore routing data. I select the Cayman Island bank statements detailing the theft of Donovan and Sylvia's retirement funds. I copy the exact IP logs proving DeAndre launched the ransomware attack against my firm. I highlight every single byte of catastrophic evidence and initiate the transfer. A progress bar flashes on the screen as gigabytes of damning financial data stream onto my encrypted physical hard drive. The progress bar hits 100%. The transfer is complete. I pull the heavy metal drive from the server port and slide it into the inner pocket of my wool coat. DeAndre thought he was holding my company hostage. Instead, he handed me the absolute power to destroy his entire existence. I shut down the air-gap terminal, unlock my office door, and step back into the bullpen ready to end this. I watch the red padlock icons on my analyst's monitors dissolve into nothing. Normalcy returns to the bullpen instantly. The digital war is won, but the physical execution demands a public stage. I slip the encrypted hard drive into my briefcase and leave the building. Tonight is the annual Vanguard Financial Philanthropic Gala. It is an elite, high-profile charity event hosted at the Waldorf Astoria, and I am the keynote speaker. It is the perfect environment to deploy a lethal weapon. I arrive at the hotel 2 hours later wrapped in a flawless, custom-tailored floor-length white silk gown. The dress is a stark canvas, projecting absolute pristine authority. My town car pulls up to the gilded entrance, but the atmosphere on the street is entirely wrong. Vanguard events usually attract conservative financial journalists and quiet photographers. Tonight, the sidewalk is choked with a ravenous mob of sleazy tabloid journalists, gossip columnists, and aggressive paparazzi holding massive boom microphones. The velvet ropes are straining under the weight of a manufactured media circus. I realize the tactical play instantly. My family has tipped off the gutter press. The moment my silver heel touches the red carpet, a synchronized explosion of blinding camera flashes erupts. Overlapping voices roar questions into the freezing night air. Blocking the grand entrance to the Waldorf Astoria, standing directly in front of the press barricade, is my family. They are desperate for control and have engineered a highly coordinated public ambush. Sylvia springs the trap. Dressed in mournful black, she throws herself against the velvet rope and unleashes a deafening theatrical wail. It is a masterclass in weaponized hysteria. She covers her face, performing profound devastation for the firing cameras. There she is. Sylvia shrieks, her voice breaking with fabricated agony, pointing a trembling finger directly at me. My own flesh and blood. A manipulative sugar baby. The tabloid reporters shove their microphones closer, drinking in the scandalous accusations. Sylvia cries louder, making sure her voice carries over the shutter clicks. She screams that I seduced Victor Thorne, accusing me of preying on a dying elderly billionaire who had lost his mental faculties. She wails to the press that I used my body to steal her family's rightful inheritance, swindling Donovan out of his life's work. The accusations are meticulously designed to be vile, meant to completely obliterate my professional integrity in front of the entire Chicago financial sector. Donovan stands in the background with his arms crossed, wearing a dark, vindictive smirk. Penelope seizes her cue. She steps forward from the shadows of the brass awning, holding an oversized crystal goblet filled to the brim with dark red wine. She fakes a dramatic, emotional stumble, feigning absolute devastation over her mother's tears. With a sharp, violent flick of her wrist, Penelope hurls the crimson liquid directly at my chest. The freezing wine hits my collarbone and splashes violently across the pristine white silk of my gown. The dark red stain spreads instantly, blooming like a massive jagged wound down my torso. The liquid soaks through the delicate fabric, dripping heavily onto the red carpet beneath my feet. The paparazzi cameras fire like machine guns, capturing the ultimate image of public humiliation. Penelope covers her mouth with a manicured hand, offering a fake, breathless apology, while her eyes burn with vicious, triumphant glee. DeAndre chuckles openly, crossing his arms and leaning back on his heels, waiting for my inevitable breakdown. They expect me to shatter. They expect me to cover my face, burst into tears, and flee back into my waiting town car in absolute disgrace. They want tomorrow morning's headline to feature a ruined, weeping fraud running from the truth. I do not scream, I do not run. My heart rate does not elevate a single beat. I look down at the ruined, dripping silk, and then I slowly raise my eyes to meet Penelope's gaze. Her triumphant smile falters instantly under the weight of my absolute freezing calm. I happen to be holding an empty crystal water flute I had taken from a tray near the curb. I do not break eye contact with my sister. I simply pivot toward DeAndre, who is standing just inches away. I extend my arm and shove the empty crystal glass firmly against his chest. Startled, he reflexively grabs the glass before it falls. I force him to hold it, treating the arrogant self-proclaimed tech genius like a lowly hired busboy. I step cleanly past Penelope, ignoring her entirely. I march right past Sylvia, who is forced to awkwardly halt her shrieking because my total lack of reaction has completely deflated her dramatic climax. The paparazzi part like the Red Sea, stunned into total silence by the sheer terrifying stoicism radiating from my ruined dress. I push through the heavy brass doors of the Waldorf Astoria, leaving the pathetic circus behind on the sidewalk. I stride through the grand foyer, the red wine dripping from my hem, leaving small crimson droplets on the marble floor. I do not stop at the coat check. I do not veer toward the restrooms to clean myself up. I walk with predatory grace directly through the massive double doors of the ballroom and head straight toward the main stage microphone. I march up the carpeted steps of the main stage, the wet silk of my ruined gown clinging to my legs. The low, sophisticated hum of the Waldorf Astoria Grand Ballroom dies instantly. 500 members of the Chicago financial elite, hedge fund managers, corporate titans, and venture capitalists freeze in their seats. The clinking of crystal and silver completely halts. Every eye in the cavernous room locks onto the dark, jagged stain of red wine blooming across my chest. I do not try to cover it. I do not break my stride. I step directly behind the transparent lucite podium and adjust the microphone. A sharp, piercing screech of audio feedback snaps the room to absolute, breathless attention. I reach into the inner pocket of my black wool coat still draped over my shoulders and pull out the heavy military-grade encrypted hard drive. With a swift, practiced motion, I plug the device directly into the podium's master presentation terminal. I give a sharp hand signal to the audiovisual technicians in the elevated control booth. The three massive high-definition projection screens suspended above the stage instantly switch from the Vanguard Financial logo to a stark, blinding white. Then the raw data hits. Gigabytes of highly classified financial ledgers, complex offshore routing matrices, and heavily redacted banking manifests scroll rapidly across the screens. The text is dense, aggressive, and undeniably authentic. The sheer volume of forensic evidence casts a harsh blue light over the shocked faces of the audience. I lean into the microphone, keeping my voice perfectly flat and brutally precise. I welcome the guests to the annual Vanguard Financial Philanthropic Gala. I acknowledge the commotion they surely witnessed in the lobby. I state clearly, and without a single tremor, that my biological mother has just publicly accused me of being the manipulative mistress of the late Victor Thorne. I let the vile accusation hang in the dead air of the ballroom. I look out past the tables of paralyzed executives and spot Donovan, Sylvia, Penelope, and DeAndre forcing their way through the main double doors. They have led the ravenous mob of tabloid journalists and paparazzi right into the venue, eager to watch me crumble under the weight of their fabricated scandal. I raise my hand and point directly at the scrolling financial data illuminating the stage. I announce to the entire room that I was never Victor Thorne's lover. I am the founder and lead investigator of Vanguard Financial Forensics. 5 years ago, Victor Thorne recognized a massive spreading infection of corporate fraud within the Chicago real estate sector. He needed a ghost. He required an auditor with absolute zero ties to his own empire and zero loyalties to the perpetrators. He hired me. I explained that the 60 wire transfers of $10,000 were not a sugar baby allowance. They were a strictly documented, legally binding corporate retainer. I was operating deep undercover, funded by the Thorne estate to dismantle a vast criminal enterprise from the outside in. And the primary target of that 5-year federal-level investigation was my own father. I hit a key on the podium terminal. The screen snapped from scrolling code to a massive color-coded schematic of Donovan's real estate firm. I do not hold back. I surgically dissect his entire empire live on stage. I highlight the phantom LLCs registered in Delaware. I expose the grossly inflated property appraisals used to secure fraudulent loans. I reveal the catastrophic liquidity crisis he has been violently hiding for a decade. I scan the crowd and lock eyes with the managing directors of the three largest investment banks in the Midwest, men who are currently sitting at VIP Table 4. I speak directly to them through the microphone. I inform them that their latest capital injections into Donovan's firm are completely gone. I project his actual credit rating onto the center screen. It is a failing, miserable score that proves he is bordering on absolute, unrecoverable bankruptcy. He is leveraging non-existent assets to secure toxic capital, and he has been utilizing DeAndre's fraudulent tech startup to wash the stolen funds through blind trusts in the Cayman Islands. The atmosphere in this ballroom violently fractures. The polite high society silence shatters into an uproar of furious shouting. The investors sitting at the front tables leap to their feet, their faces contorted with rage as they stare at the undeniable mathematical proof of their vanished millions. Chairs crash to the floor as executives scramble for their phones, desperately dialing their legal teams. The paparazzi who had swarmed the back of the room expecting a salacious family scandal instantly realize they are capturing the biggest corporate fraud exposure of the decade. The entire media mob pivots in unison. The blinding strobe of camera flashes abruptly shifts entirely away from me. The lenses, the boom microphones, and the glaring spotlights focus with intense predatory aggression on the back of the room. Donovan stands frozen in the center aisle, bathed in the harsh flashing lights of the press. The arrogant sneer is completely wiped from his face, replaced by a mask of sheer hyperventilating panic. His eyes dart frantically around the room as he watches his most powerful investors advancing toward him. He opens his mouth to shout, trying to spin a desperate lie, but his voice is completely drowned out by the aggressive shouting of the reporters shoving microphones into his face. Sylvia physically recoils, pulling her heavy mink coat over her head to shield herself from the camera flashes. She shrieks in genuine, unadulterated terror as the paparazzi aggressively corner her against the wall. Penelope bursts into hysterical tears, sinking to her knees on the carpet as she realizes the luxury life she flaunted is nothing but stolen air. DeAndre does not even try to help his wife. He turns and desperately attempts to sprint back through the double doors, abandoning the family to save himself, but he slams directly into a solid wall of dark suits. The Waldorf Astoria security team, bolstered by my own Vanguard private contractors, descends upon the chaotic scene with ruthless efficiency. They do not treat my family like VIP guests. They treat them like hostile trespassers. Two massive guards seize Donovan by the arms, lifting him entirely off his feet. He kicks and thrashes, screaming empty threats of lawsuits and retribution, but the guards drag him backward without breaking a sweat. Another contractor grabs Sylvia by the elbows, physically marching her away as her shrieks echo off the crystal chandeliers. Penelope and DeAndre are shoved forcefully out the doors, stumbling over each other in utter disgrace as the flashing cameras follow them into the freezing night. I stand silently at the podium, the red wine drying cold against my skin. I watch the heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom slam shut behind them, cutting off their screams. I unplug my encrypted drive from the terminal. The screens fade to black. The execution is complete. At 6 o'clock the following morning, the Chicago skyline is still shrouded in a heavy, freezing mist. My private cell phone vibrates on the marble counter of my kitchen. The caller ID simply reads Gideon Reed. I answer and he tells me a car is waiting downstairs. I do not ask questions. I dress in a sharp charcoal suit, secure my hair into a tight functional knot, and head down to the street. Gideon is sitting in the back of a black armored SUV. His demeanor is entirely different from the polished corporate attorney I met in the boardroom. Today he looks like a man preparing for war. He hands me a steaming cup of black coffee and taps the glass partition, signaling the driver to move. We leave the affluent high-rises of the financial district behind and head deep into the industrial outskirts of the city. The landscape shifts into a decaying sprawl of rusted train tracks, abandoned manufacturing plants, and crumbling brick smokestacks. Gideon remains silent for the entire 40-minute drive, staring out the rain-slicked window. The SUV finally turns down a dead-end alleyway and stops in front of a massive, dilapidated meatpacking warehouse. The exterior is covered in aggressive graffiti, and the windows are shattered. It looks completely condemned. Gideon steps out into the freezing rain, and I follow him toward a heavy corrugated metal loading door. There is no handle and no visible lock. Gideon reaches into his overcoat and pulls out a biometric scanning device disguised as a standard garage remote. He presses his thumb against the glass reader. Deep within the rotting brickwork, heavy industrial deadbolts disengage with a loud metallic crack. The metal door slides upward, revealing a pitch-black corridor. We step inside and the door slams shut behind us, plunging us into total darkness. A second later, a row of harsh LED lights flickers to life, illuminating a pristine concrete tunnel that looks entirely out of place inside the decaying building. We walk to the end of the corridor and step into a commercial freight elevator. Gideon inserts a specialized keycard into the control panel and presses the lowest button. We descend for a long time. The temperature drops rapidly, chilling the air around us. The elevator doors open and I step into Victor Thorne's true legacy. It is a massive subterranean bunker. The air is climate-controlled, dry, and completely sterile. Thick bundles of fiber optic cables run along the reinforced concrete ceiling, powering rows of heavy-duty servers and high-density mobile shelving units. It hums with the quiet, intense energy of an off-the-grid intelligence agency. Gideon explains that Victor spent 20 years building this secure archive. It is completely severed from the outside world, untouched by cloud servers or internet protocols. It is a fortress of physical evidence and raw data. Gideon leads me past the towering shelves of corporate records directly toward the back of the bunker. A heavy titanium vault door stands secured by a physical combination dial and a heavy steel wheel. Gideon stops and reaches into his breast pocket. He pulls out a heavy antique brass key attached to a braided leather lanyard. He holds it out to me. His expression is completely unreadable, but his eyes convey the absolute gravity of this moment. He tells me that Victor left explicit instructions that I was to be the only person allowed to cross this final threshold. I take the cold brass key from his hand. I slide it into the heavy mechanical lock below the combination dial. I turn the key and hear the heavy tumblers fall into place. I grab the steel wheel, pull it downward, and haul the heavy vault door open. The room inside is surprisingly small and entirely analog. There are no computer monitors or digital screens. The walls are lined with steel filing cabinets containing decades of meticulously organized legal files bound in thick red folders. In the dead center of the room sits a solid oak table. Resting on top of the wood is a vintage reel-to-reel tape recorder. The magnetic tape is already threaded through the silver spools, waiting to be played. I walk over to the table and sit in the single leather chair. The silence in the vault is absolute. I reach forward and press down on the heavy mechanical play button. The spools begin to spin with a soft, rhythmic clicking. A burst of static hisses from the built-in speaker, followed by the sound of heavy, labored breathing. Then Victor Thorne's voice fills the underground room. It is raspy, exhausted, and hollowed out by age, but the underlying tone vibrates with a cold, calculated fury. He addresses me by name. He says he knows I have executed the first phase of the plan. He knows I watched my family squirm under the crushing weight of their own exposed corruption. But now he says it is time for me to understand exactly why I was chosen to hold the blade. Victor's voice echoes off the steel walls as he transports me back 30 years. He explains that in 1996 there was no Vanguard Financial. There was only Thorne and Associates, a brilliant, aggressive real estate syndicate that Victor built from the ground up with his own hands. He possessed the vision, the capital, and the ruthless drive to conquer the Chicago market. He hired a young, ambitious junior partner to manage the acquisitions. That partner was my father, Donovan. He hired a brilliant, cutthroat accountant to manage the corporate ledgers. That accountant was my mother, Sylvia. Victor trusted them implicitly. He brought them into his inner circle and treated them like family. But Donovan and Sylvia were not interested in building a legacy alongside him. They wanted the empire for themselves. Victor's voice grows harsher as he details the absolute precision of their betrayal. While Victor was negotiating massive downtown development deals, Sylvia was systematically manipulating the internal ledgers. She created dozens of offshore shell companies using Victor's forged signature. She rerouted millions of dollars in corporate tax liabilities into phantom accounts, intentionally violating federal tax codes. Donovan utilized his position to secure fraudulent appraisals and plant the fabricated financial evidence directly into Victor's personal office safes. They did not just steal his money, they engineered a flawless federal trap. When the IRS raided Thorne and Associates, the paper trail pointed entirely to Victor. Sylvia testified against him under oath, presenting her manipulated ledgers as absolute truth. Donovan stood before a federal judge and perjured himself, claiming Victor was a tyrannical fraudster, forcing his employees to hide his crimes. Victor was sentenced to 10 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary for tax evasion and corporate racketeering. While Victor rotted in a concrete cell, stripped of his freedom and his dignity, Donovan and Sylvia executed a hostile takeover of the remaining assets. They rebranded the syndicate using Victor's stolen capital as the bedrock for their new corporate empire. The sprawling mansions, the luxury cars, the elite private schools, and the suffocating arrogance my family paraded around my entire life were all funded by the systematic destruction of Victor Thorne. The tape recorder clicks as the spool reaches the end of the reel. The heavy silence returns to the vault. I sit perfectly still, staring at the spinning silver wheels. My entire existence, my childhood, my education, the very foundation of my reality, was built on the bones of an innocent man. Donovan and Sylvia did not just raise me to be cold. They raised me on blood money. I reach out and stop the tape recorder. I look at the walls of perfectly preserved legal files surrounding me. I now possess the exact blueprints of their original crime. They thought they had buried the past. They had no idea I was about to dig it up and use it to bury them. I do not leave the vault. I command Gideon to lock the heavy titanium door from the outside and instruct him not to return for 24 hours. The heavy steel tumblers slam into place, sealing me inside the subterranean bunker. The silence is absolute, broken only by the hum of the climate control system and the rustle of turning pages. I strip off my tailored suit jacket, roll up my sleeves, and pull the first heavy red folder from the top drawer of the nearest steel filing cabinet. I am a forensic auditor. I dissect financial ecosystems for a living, finding the microscopic stress fractures in massive corporate structures. Now I am dissecting the very foundation of my own family. I spread the decades-old documents across the solid oak table. The sheer volume of raw data Victor meticulously collected over 30 years is staggering. There are original bank statements from the mid-90s, faded fax transmissions, carbon copies of property deeds, and stacks of internal audit reports from Thorne and Associates. I begin the tedious, methodical process of cross-referencing Victor's narrative with the hard physical evidence. I pull out my high-powered magnification loupe and examine the signatures on the early corporate filings. Sylvia thought she was clever. She was a cutthroat accountant, but she lacked the modern forensic tools I possess today. I lay the original incorporation documents for my parents' holding company next to Victor's authentic signature cards. The forgery is glaringly obvious when scrutinized under a forensic lens. Sylvia failed to replicate the natural pressure variations in Victor's handwriting. The ink deposits are completely uniform, indicating a slow, deliberate tracing rather than a fluid, natural signature. She hijacked his identity to authorize the phantom offshore accounts. I move to Donovan's contributions. I sift through stacks of property appraisals from 1996. He intentionally inflated the value of commercial real estate portfolios, using dummy buyer profiles to artificially drive up the asset margins. He then used those inflated assets as collateral for massive toxic loans. He deliberately structured the loan documents to ensure the liability fell entirely on Victor. I spend the next 14 hours locked in a state of absolute hyper-focus. I track the flow of stolen capital penny by penny. I mapped the exact trajectory of the embezzled funds as they moved from Victor's accounts through Sylvia's offshore shell companies and directly into the foundational accounts of my family's current real estate empire. The crime is documented in agonizing, undeniable detail. My parents did not build an empire. They hijacked a fully constructed machine and slapped their own name on the front door. My eyes are burning and my hands are stained with decades-old ink dust, but I cannot stop. I reach out and press the heavy mechanical play button on the reel-to-reel tape recorder. The magnetic spools begin to spin again. Victor's raspy, exhausted voice fills the small underground room once more. The narrative shifts from his destruction to my creation. Victor explains that he did not just spend his years in federal prison rotting in despair, he spent them planning. When he was finally released, he possessed a fraction of his former wealth but an unlimited reservoir of patience. He hired private investigators. He monitored my parents' every move. He watched them parade his stolen wealth across Chicago high society. But more importantly, he watched me. Victor says he tracked my academic career. He knew I possessed a brilliant analytical mind and a natural aptitude for forensic accounting. He knew I was nothing like Donovan or Sylvia. The tape crackles with sharp static as Victor brings up the night that changed my life 5 years ago. He knows exactly what happened in the study of my parents' mansion. He knows they demanded I falsify audit reports for a corrupt city alderman to secure a lucrative zoning contract. He knows I refused point-blank to commit federal fraud. He knows they disowned me, kicked me out into the freezing Chicago winter, and blacklisted me from every major financial firm in the city. Victor's voice drops to a harsh, commanding whisper. He tells me that was the exact moment he knew I was the one. He watched me get cast out by the very people who had destroyed his life. He watched me refuse to compromise my integrity, even when it cost me my family and my financial security. He saw the cold, calculated fury in my eyes and recognized a reflection of his own soul. Victor realized that I possessed the exact combination of forensic genius and unyielding moral absolute required to tear my parents' empire down to the studs. He chose me as his sole heir because he knew I would not just take the $50 million and walk away. He knew I would weaponize it. I stopped the tape recorder for the final time. The silence in the vault feels different now. It is no longer the silence of a tomb. It is the silence of an armory. I sit back in the leather chair and stare at the mountain of physical evidence stacked on the oak table. A profound, absolute shift occurs within my mind. When I walked into Gideon Reed's boardroom yesterday morning, my objective was entirely defensive. I was an independent auditor protecting my agency from a hostile takeover. When DeAndre launched his pathetic ransomware attack, my goal was simple retaliation. But the parameters of engagement have fundamentally changed. This is no longer a corporate dispute over a $50 million inheritance. It is not about defending Vanguard Financial Forensics from my sleazy brother-in-law. This is an execution. I am no longer just an auditor. I am the designated architect of a 30-year reckoning. Donovan and Sylvia built their entire existence on a foundation of perjury, forgery, and stolen capital. They destroyed a man to buy their luxury cars, their country club memberships, and their unearned arrogance. I gather the original forged documents, the fraudulent loan appraisals, and the offshore routing numbers. I pack them carefully into secure forensic evidence bags. I am going to dismantle their stolen empire piece by piece. I will not leave a single bank account active. I will not leave a single property deed in their name. I will trigger a federal investigation so massive and so airtight that no team of expensive defense attorneys will ever save them. I pack my briefcase, button my shirt, and wait for Gideon to unlock the door. The Ice Queen is dead. I am the executioner now. The heavy titanium door groans outward, echoing through the subterranean bunker. Gideon stands on the other side, his posture rigid and his eyes questioning. I walk past him, the heavy red folders secured tightly inside my leather briefcase. We do not speak. The drive back to the city is a blur of gray skies and driving rain. Our destination is the Cook County Circuit Court. Today is the scheduled probate hearing to officially finalize the transfer of Victor Thorne's $50 million estate into my name. We bypass the crowded metal detectors, entering through a private attorney access corridor. Gideon leads the way to room 402, the probate division. I push open the heavy oak doors, expecting a routine administrative proceeding with a standard court clerk. Instead, I walk into a meticulously staged ambush. Donovan and Sylvia are already seated at the petitioner's table. Penelope is standing near the jury box, dabbing her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. DeAndre leans against the wooden railing wearing a tailored navy suit and a nauseatingly confident smirk. Presiding at the bench is the Honorable Marcus Vance. I know Vance by reputation. He is a notorious fixture in Chicago real estate litigation, known for rubber stamping zoning variances for Donovan's firm. He is a man whose election campaigns were heavily funded by dark money political action committees secretly managed by my mother. He is bought and paid for. Vance does not ask me to approach the bench. He does not ask Gideon to present the estate transfer documents. He brings his heavy wooden gavel down with a sharp crack and announces an emergency ex parte hearing. He declares that a motion has been filed just moments ago, challenging my legal competency to inherit. Penelope steps forward, approaching the bench with a thick manila envelope. She plays the role of the devastated, terrified sister flawlessly. She places the envelope on the polished wood and begins to speak, her voice trembling with manufactured grief. She tells Judge Vance that 5 years ago, I did not simply leave the family business to strike out on my own. She claims I suffered a violent, catastrophic psychotic break. She pulls out a stack of crisp white papers. They are medical records printed on official hospital letterhead, bearing the forged signatures of prominent psychiatric specialists. Penelope spins a fabricated, twisted narrative detailing how the stress of the corporate world completely broke my mind. She claims the night I was evicted from their home was actually a desperate attempt by my loving parents to restrain me and get me into residential psychiatric care. She tells the judge that I was throwing furniture, screaming about corporate conspiracies, and threatening to destroy the family. The forged records list severe paranoid schizophrenia, extreme delusions of grandeur, and violent erratic tendencies. Penelope points a perfectly manicured finger at me and states that my current claim to a $50 million estate is just the latest manifestation of my severe, untreated delusions. She claims I have spent the last 5 years living in a fantasy world pretending to be a forensic auditor to feed my paranoia. Donovan stands up next, playing the weary, heartbroken father. He places a hand over his heart and speaks directly to the corrupt judge. He claims he and Sylvia have spent 5 years searching for me, trying to get me the medical help I desperately need. He gestures to my stoic silence, calling it a catatonic episode brought on by the stress of the courtroom. He begs the court not to hand a massive financial empire to a woman incapable of distinguishing reality from hallucination. He states that giving me that kind of money would be a death sentence. Judge Vance nods solemnly, playing along with the scripted charade. He looks down at the forged documents and states that given the severity of the medical evidence presented, he has no choice but to intervene. He rules that I am a danger to myself and completely unfit to manage any financial assets or make any legal decisions. He announces he is issuing an emergency psychiatric hold and invalidating my immediate claim to the Thorne estate. Sylvia stands up, smoothing the front of her designer skirt. She requests that the court appoint a temporary conservator to manage the Thorne estate until I am deemed legally competent and fully rehabilitated. She suggests someone impartial but deeply invested in the family's well-being, someone with a proven track record of executive leadership and impeccable financial management. DeAndre pushes off the railing and steps into the center of the room. He buttons his suit jacket and adopts a look of solemn, reluctant duty. Judge Vance does not even pretend to review alternative options. He does not ask Gideon for a rebuttal. He immediately grants the petition. He signs the heavy stack of legal documents establishing a temporary financial conservatorship. With a stroke of his pen, Vance grants DeAndre absolute control over my bank accounts. my business assets, and the entire $50 million Thorn estate. DeAndre is now the legal guardian of my wealth. Gideon tenses beside me, preparing to shout a massive legal objection. I reach out and grip his forearm hard, forcing him to stay silent. I do not want him to stop this. I want this exact scenario to play out on the official court record. They think they have won. They think they have brilliantly outsmarted me by leveraging the legal system to strip away my power. Penelope looks at me with feigned pity, while DeAndre flashes a triumphant, greedy smile. He thinks he just secured a $50 million lifeline to save his fraudulent tech startup. Donovan and Sylvia look incredibly smug, confident that they have finally neutralized the threat I pose to their empire. They are relying on my shock to paralyze me. They expect me to scream, to deny the accusations, and to beg the judge to listen to reason. They want me to act crazy to prove their forged diagnosis right here in the courtroom. But my briefcase is heavy with the undeniable truth of their 30-year corporate fraud. I stand perfectly still, absorbing their victorious glances. I let them lock the trap around their own ankles. By filing these forged medical documents and committing perjury in a federal probate court, they have just added massive felony charges to their already towering list of crimes. I turn on my heel and walk out of the courtroom, leaving DeAndre clutching his newly printed conservatorship papers. But my retreat is a calculated illusion. I do not leave the courthouse. I walk straight out of the probate division and head directly toward the heavy mahogany doors of courtroom 4B. Gideon is already moving alongside me, executing the exact contingency protocol we prepared for this scenario. We do not flee the building. We file an immediate demand for an emergency evidentiary hearing on the record. By bypassing the administrative desk and invoking federal fraud statutes, Gideon forces Judge Vance to formally reconvene in a fully monitored judicial setting. The court reporter is present. The recording devices are active. Every single word spoken in courtroom 4B will be bound by the absolute penalty of perjury. This is the kill box. Donovan and Sylvia take their seats at the plaintiff's table. They look mildly inconvenienced by the procedural delay, but their confidence remains unshaken. DeAndre sits behind them, casually checking his expensive watch. Penelope pats her perfect hair. Judge Vance takes the bench, his face flushed with irritation as he glares down at me. He bangs his wooden gavel and demands we proceed quickly. Gideon calls Donovan and Sylvia to the witness stand. They raise their right hands and swear an oath to tell the truth. I remain completely silent, seated at the defense table, with my hands folded, resting on my leather briefcase. I watch them weave their fabricated tragedy into the official court record. Donovan speaks first. He puts on a masterful performance of a grieving father. He testifies under oath that I have been suffering from severe paranoid delusions for half a decade. He claims I was violent, unpredictable, and entirely detached from reality. Sylvia takes the stand next. She produces a pristine tissue and dabs at a non-existent tear. She swears before the court that the psychiatric documents presented by Penelope are entirely authentic. She explicitly states that multiple medical professionals evaluated me and concluded I was legally incompetent. She begs the judge to uphold the conservatorship so DeAndre can protect my assets from my own insanity. I do not object. I do not interrupt. I let the court reporter transcribe every single lie. I let the trap snap shut. Judge Vance turns his impatient gaze toward me. He asks if the defense has any witnesses to call. Gideon stands up and formally calls me to the stand. I decline to offer verbal testimony. Instead, I reach into my tailored suit jacket and pull out a sleek titanium flash drive. I inform the court that this drive contains certified encrypted digital forensics. Gideon takes the drive and hands it directly to the court bailiff, requesting it be plugged into the main audiovisual presentation terminal. Judge Vance scoffs but allows it. The massive high-definition monitors mounted on the courtroom walls flicker to life. The screens do not show medical records. They show raw, aggressive lines of digital code. I stand up and address the room. My voice is sharp, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion. I direct the judge's attention to the metadata currently projected on the screens. I explain that a forensic audit of the medical documents Penelope submitted reveals a glaring digital footprint. the files were not generated by any psychiatric hospital in the state of Illinois. They were created exactly 48 hours ago. I tap a button on my remote. The screen zooms in on a specific IP address. I announce to the silent courtroom that this IP address belongs to the internal secure servers of Vanguard Tech Solutions, DeAndre's company. I project the raw keystroke logs, the stolen hospital letterhead templates, and the exact timestamps of the digital fabrication. The data proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that DeAndre personally manufactured the fake medical records on his own corporate laptop. DeAndre's arrogant posture instantly crumbles. The blood drains from his face and he grips the edge of the wooden table. Penelope physically recoils, staring at the screen in absolute horror. Sylvia and Donovan freeze their carefully constructed masks of parental concern, shattering into sheer panic. They just committed perjury in a federal proceeding based on forged documents. Judge Vance slams his gavel down hard. He demands I turn off the monitors immediately, shouting that this evidence is inadmissible. His face is purple with rage. I do not turn off the monitors. I press the next button. The screen shifts from DeAndre's servers to an international banking schematic. A wire transfer receipt materializes in stark black and white. It shows a routing matrix originating from a phantom shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. I speak over the frantic banging of the judge's gavel. I inform the court that this specific shell company is a primary node in DeAndre's fraudulent tech startup. It is a mechanism designed to wash stolen real estate funds. I hit the final button. The recipient of the wire transfer fills the screens. It is a blind trust holding an offshore account. The registered beneficiary of that trust is the Honorable Marcus Vance. The transaction date perfectly aligns with a controversial zoning variance he granted to Donovan's firm 6 months ago. The silence in courtroom 4B is deafening. The court reporter stops typing. The bailiff stares at the monitors with wide eyes. Judge Vance drops his gavel. The aggressive authority vanishes from his posture, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. He looks at the undeniable proof of his own corruption glowing brightly on the walls of his own courtroom. He knows I have just handed his entire career, his freedom, and his legacy to the federal authorities on a silver platter. He is a compromised asset, and I just burned him to the ground. Vance begins to hyperventilate. He does not ask questions. He does not attempt to explain the wire transfer. He grabs his pen with a violently shaking hand and furiously scribbles across the conservatorship order. His voice cracks as he stammers out a frantic ruling. He declares the petitioner's evidence to be entirely falsified. He immediately throws out the family's case, vacates the emergency hold, and completely revokes the conservatorship. He strikes his gavel one final time and practically runs out of the room, seeking refuge in his private chambers. The execution is flawless. I calmly unplug my titanium flash drive from the terminal. The screens fade to black. I turn around and face my family. DeAndre looks like he is going to vomit. Penelope is clutching her chest, gasping for air. Sylvia is staring at me with a look of absolute paralyzed dread. Donovan stands frozen at the edge of the aisle, blocking my path to the exit. The arrogant titan of Chicago real estate has been reduced to a trembling shell of a man. His eyes dart frantically around the empty courtroom, searching for a way out of the nightmare I have just trapped him in. I walk straight toward him. I do not break my stride. I stop mere inches from his face. I look directly into his terrified eyes. I lean in close, letting the silence stretch for one agonizing second. I am coming for the rest of it, I whisper. I step past him, push open the heavy oak doors, and walk out into the cold Chicago morning. I push open the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B and walk out into the cold Chicago morning. Gideon falls into step beside me, his long strides matching my own. We do not celebrate. We do not exchange a single word of triumph. The air is freezing, but my mind is absolute fire. We reach the armored SUV idling at the curb and slip into the heavy leather seats. I immediately open my encrypted laptop, resting it on my knees. I issue a sharp command to Gideon to route our secure connection through the digital backdoor I intentionally left buried deep within DeAndre's corporate servers. The high-definition screen flickers for a split second before snapping into perfect clarity. I am now tapped directly into the live security camera feeds and internal audio microphones of Vanguard Tech Solutions. I lean back against the headrest and watch the rats cannibalize each other. The feed shows DeAndre's sprawling, glass-walled corner office. It was designed to project the illusion of limitless success with its imported Italian furniture and panoramic views of the skyline. Right now, it is a very expensive cage. DeAndre is pacing frantically behind his desk, his tie loosened and his collar soaked with sweat. He is hyperventilating. His massive dual monitors are flashing aggressively with a cascading wall of red alerts. Incoming calls, urgent emails, and direct messages from his primary investors are flooding his terminal. They watch the morning financial news. They know his offshore routing accounts have been frozen by a federal judge. The Ponzi scheme is rapidly and violently unwinding. DeAndre has no actual tech product. He possesses no proprietary software or revolutionary algorithms. His entire company is a hollow shell built exclusively to wash Donovan's stolen real estate money and use the clean capital to pay off early backers. Now the money flow has stopped completely. He stares at a negative balance of catastrophic proportions. His investors are actively pulling their capital and demanding returns he simply does not possess. The heavy glass doors of his office violently swing inward. Donovan and Sylvia storm into the room looking like cornered animals. Penelope trails closely behind them, her face streaked with ruined, expensive makeup. The polished high society illusion of their tight-knit family shatters the absolute second the doors slam shut. Donovan unleashes a barrage of furious screaming. He marches right up to DeAndre's desk and slams his fists down on the glass surface. He blames his son-in-law for the spectacular disaster in the courtroom. He screams that DeAndre's sloppy, amateur digital footprint has just exposed their entire financial network to an inevitable federal indictment. Sylvia stands beside her husband, her voice shrill and demanding. She orders DeAndre to call his IT department and wipe the server logs immediately before the authorities arrive with a warrant. DeAndre snaps. The facade of the respectful, charismatic son-in-law vanishes completely. He grabs a heavy glass chair and kicks it viciously across the room. It shatters against the far wall, sending shards raining down on the carpet. He screams at Donovan to shut his mouth. He violently points a trembling finger at his flashing monitors and declares that his investors are demanding $20 million by the end of the business day. If he does not wire the funds, the SEC and the FBI will descend on his headquarters and tear his operation apart. He stares Donovan dead in the eye and demands a $20 million wire transfer immediately. Donovan barks a harsh, desperate laugh. He tells DeAndre there is no $20 million. He explains that my forensic exposure of his fraudulent property appraisals has triggered an absolute global freeze on his credit lines. The managing directors at the investment banks have locked his accounts. His real estate empire is functionally bankrupt. He cannot bail DeAndre out because he cannot even save himself. DeAndre's eyes go completely dead. The panic recedes, replaced by a cold, calculating survival instinct. He turns away from Donovan and walks slowly toward a large modern art canvas hanging on the side wall. He swings the painting aside to reveal a concealed wall safe. He enters the code, pulls out a thick silver external hard drive, and walks back to his desk. He slams the heavy metal drive down onto the center of the glass table. He looks directly at Donovan and Sylvia, dropping the ultimate blackmail. He reveals that over the past 3 years, while acting as their dedicated money launderer, he made backup copies of absolutely everything. He tells them the silver drive contains the original unredacted corporate filings from Thorne and Associates. It contains the internal communications between Donovan and Sylvia, coordinating the frame-up of Victor Thorne 30 years ago. He has the exact digital roadmap of their perjury, their forgery, and their theft. He kept the evidence as a permanent insurance policy against them. Sylvia visibly pales, her manicured hands trembling violently as she realizes the magnitude of his treason. Donovan takes a staggering step backward, absolute shock radiating across his face. DeAndre smiles a terrifying, predatory smile. He delivers his ultimatum. He tells them they must liquidate whatever hidden offshore assets they have left and wire him $20 million by 5 o'clock today. If the money does not hit his account, he will walk straight into the local FBI field office and hand them the silver drive. He tells them he will gladly cut an immunity deal by serving up the masterminds behind a 30-year corporate racketeering conspiracy to save his own skin. The office erupts into total chaos. Sylvia lunges forward, screaming that DeAndre is a traitor and a parasite. Donovan grabs a heavy brass paperweight from the desk, his face contorted with violent rage, looking entirely ready to bash DeAndre's skull in. But the most horrifying reaction belongs to Penelope. She does not defend her parents. She does not express outrage over her husband's vicious blackmail. She sinks to her knees on the glass-covered floor and grabs Donovan by his suit jacket. She begins hysterically begging him to pay the money. She cries that she cannot lose her massive estate, her country club status, or her socialite reputation. She screams that her parents must sacrifice themselves to save her husband's fraudulent company. She openly demands that Donovan and Sylvia sell their own home, empty their retirement accounts, and do whatever it takes to keep the money flowing into her pockets. Donovan looks down at his favorite daughter, the golden child he showered with stolen wealth for her entire life, and realizes she views him entirely as an ATM. Sylvia stares at her son-in-law, recognizing the exact same ruthless cutthroat greed she utilized to destroy Victor Thorne. I sit quietly in the back of the SUV, watching the entire miserable scene play out on my laptop screen. The family that threw me into the freezing streets 5 years ago is now viciously tearing itself to pieces over a pile of stolen cash. I close the laptop. The real destruction is just beginning. Gideon navigates the armored SUV through the slick downtown traffic, heading back to our secure headquarters. I do not look out the window. My mind is already constructing the next phase of the architecture. DeAndre has inadvertently accelerated my timeline by blackmailing my parents for $20 million. Donovan and Sylvia are cornered, desperate, and bleeding capital. They are in the exact psychological state required for a fatal unforced error. They are drowning, and I am going to throw them an anvil disguised as a life raft. I authorize the immediate activation of a shadow corporation I established months ago precisely for this moment. It is a fully functional, legally airtight corporate entity named Aegis Alpine Holdings. It is registered in Geneva, Switzerland, shielded by notoriously impenetrable banking secrecy laws and layers of encrypted proxy directors. On paper, it is a consortium of aggressively wealthy European biotechnology investors looking to establish a massive footprint in the American Midwest. In reality, it is just me sitting in a subterranean vault, weaponizing Victor Thorne's stolen fortune. The asset I am targeting is the crown jewel of Donovan's crumbling portfolio. It is a 70-acre stretch of prime commercial real estate in the South Loop. It is a derelict industrial zone that Donovan has been trying to offload for years. He lacks the capital to develop it, and the market has continuously rejected his inflated asking price. It is a massive financial deadweight dragging his firm under. I instruct my Swiss legal intermediaries to draft a formal letter of intent and transmit it directly to Donovan's private server. The offer is staggering. Aegis Alpine Holdings proposes a joint venture to purchase the South Loop lot for $40 million in cash to construct a state-of-the-art medical research campus. The terms are incredibly aggressive, promising an expedited closing window of less than 48 hours. It is the ultimate bait. $40 million is exactly what Donovan needs. It gives him $20 million to pay off DeAndre's extortion and secure the silver hard drive containing the proof of his 30-year-old crimes. It leaves him with another $20 million to recapitalize his failing firm and project an illusion of invincibility to his panicked investors. But the catch is the absolute kill switch. The Swiss contract contains a standard but uncompromising clause. To secure the $40 million cash injection and enter the joint venture, Donovan must demonstrate equal commitment and immediate liquidity. He must wire $20 million in clean, untethered cash into a designated international escrow account as a non-refundable collateral deposit. The contract explicitly states that if Donovan fails to meet the development benchmarks or breaches the partnership agreement, the collateral is instantly forfeited to the Swiss holding company. Through my digital backdoor, I watch the encrypted email land in Donovan's inbox. The reaction is instantaneous and entirely predictable. Donovan and Sylvia are blinded by sheer, unadulterated greed. They do not see a trap. They see a miraculous salvation descending from the heavens at the exact second they are about to be destroyed. They are so paralyzed by the ticking clock of DeAndre's blackmail deadline that they completely abandon their standard corporate due diligence. They do not dispatch investigators to Geneva. They do not demand face-to-face meetings with the phantom billionaires behind Aegis Alpine Holdings. They read the number 40 million and they completely lose their minds. I sit in my leather chair monitoring their internal communications as the frantic liquidation begins. The audio feeds from Donovan's office are a symphony of absolute panic. Penelope is still weeping in the corner, demanding that they hurry. She does not care about the Swiss joint venture or the long-term health of the family firm. She only cares that DeAndre receives his blackmail money by 5 o'clock so she can keep her country club memberships and her luxury cars. She screams at her father to move faster, completely ignorant of the financial suicide he is committing on her behalf. Donovan barks orders at his accountants, his voice hoarse with stress. They have exactly 6 hours to scrape together $20 million in liquid cash to satisfy the Swiss escrow demand. They cannot use corporate credit lines because my forensic exposure of their fraudulent property appraisals has already triggered a massive freeze by their investment banks. They are entirely cut off from traditional domestic lending. They must bleed their own personal wealth dry. I watch the digital ledgers light up as Sylvia ruthlessly liquidates her hidden assets. She is a woman operating purely on survival instinct. She calls her offshore brokers in the Cayman Islands and empties her secret emergency accounts, taking massive, catastrophic early withdrawal penalties. She contacts private European auction houses and quietly sells off her extensive collection of contemporary art, accepting cash offers at a fraction of their actual market value. She liquidates her untouchable diamond reserves, her inherited jewelry, and signs over the deed to their luxury vacation home in Aspen. Donovan is matching her desperation. He cashes out their remaining untouched retirement portfolios, absorbing brutal tax hits. He leverages the absolute maximum equity in their primary Chicago mansion, securing a predatory hard money loan with exorbitant double-digit interest rates from unregulated private lenders. They are literally dismantling the very luxury they stole from Victor Thorne 30 years ago just to survive the afternoon. They scrape every dark corner of their existence, gathering every hidden dollar they possess. They are operating under the delusion that this $20 million sacrifice is temporary. They believe the $40 million payout from the Swiss investors will hit their accounts tomorrow, erasing this desperate scramble and restoring their empire to its former glory. At exactly 4:14 in the afternoon, the mechanical chime of my encrypted terminal echoes through the silent vault. The digital transfer sequence initiates. I watch the progress bar fill as the stolen capital moves across the globe. The funds originate from Donovan's cobbled-together domestic accounts. They bounce through a secure clearinghouse in New York, cross the Atlantic, and land directly into the designated escrow account in Geneva. The screen flashes a brilliant emerald green confirming the deposit, $20 million. Donovan and Sylvia have successfully met the collateral requirement. They slump back in their expensive office chairs thousands of miles away, exhaling in exhausted triumph. They believe they have secured the $40 million joint venture. They believe they can now pay off DeAndre's blackmail and save their legacy. They are completely unaware that the billionaire Swiss buyer does not exist. They have absolutely no idea that they just willingly, eagerly wired every last remaining cent of their personal liquid wealth directly into a shadow account controlled entirely by the estranged daughter they threw away. The $40 million payout is never coming. The joint venture is a ghost. I lean forward and lock the Swiss escrow account with an unbreakable cryptographic key. The money is mine now. The final pillar of their stolen empire has just been kicked away. The digital transfer sequence completes its cycle. The money is mine now. The final pillar of their stolen empire has just been kicked away. But a digital wire transfer is merely the invisible mechanism of their ruin. It is bloodless. It is silent. I require visual confirmation of their absolute surrender. I withdraw my hands from the encrypted laptop keyboard and input a new sequence of proxy commands into my secondary terminal. A fresh high-definition window opens on my monitor, seamlessly overriding the Swiss banking portal. I am no longer looking at lines of financial code. I am tapped directly into a live security feed. The camera is discreetly mounted in the corner of a private executive suite at Sterling Continental Bank. It is a plush, ridiculously opulent room designed specifically to make desperate billionaires feel secure while they are being financially disemboweled. Dark mahogany paneling lines the walls. A massive polished marble desk dominates the center of the room. Seated behind it is Elias Sterling. He is a shadow financier, a man who operates exclusively in the dark, unregulated gray areas of corporate lending. He provides immediate liquid capital to tycoons facing sudden catastrophic ruin, but his interest rates are extortionate and his collateral demands are absolute. He is a predator and he smells blood in the water. Sitting directly across from Elias are Donovan, Sylvia, and Penelope. They look entirely out of place in their current state of disheveled panic. The polished high society armor they have worn for 3 decades is completely gone. Sylvia is clutching her designer handbag so tightly, her knuckles are bone white. Penelope is trembling, staring blankly at the marble surface with wide, terrified eyes. Donovan is sweating through his custom-tailored suit jacket. Elias slides a towering mountain of thick legal contracts across the desk. I turn up the audio feed on my terminal. The acoustics of the banking suite are perfect. I can hear the crisp, sharp rustle of the heavy paper. Elias speaks in a smooth, practiced tone, outlining the terms of the emergency capital injection. It is a financial death sentence disguised as a bridge loan. He demands a 35% interest rate compounded weekly. He requires an immediate default clause with 0 grace periods. If Donovan misses a single payment or fails to produce the promised Swiss returns, Sterling Continental takes immediate unconditional possession of every asset listed in the contract. Donovan does not flinch. He is completely blinded by the illusion of the Swiss mega project. He leans forward and aggressively assures Elias that the exorbitant loan will be fully repaid in less than 30 days. He boasts about the massive commercial real estate deal he has just secured with Aegis Alpine Holdings. He proudly claims the Swiss joint venture will yield a 200% return on his investment within the month. He tells the corrupt banker that this desperate collateral maneuver is just a temporary stepping stone to doubling the family wealth. He speaks with the arrogant certainty of a man who believes he has just outsmarted total destruction. I sit back in my leather chair in the subterranean vault. I reach for the insulated thermos resting on the solid oak table and pour myself a cup of black coffee. The dark liquid is steaming in the freezing air of the bunker. I bring the ceramic mug to my lips and take a slow, deliberate sip. The coffee is bitter and perfect. I watch the live feed with absolute clinical detachment as my parents prepare to sign their own financial death warrants. Elias begins listing the hard physical assets Donovan is required to sign over to secure the funds. I listen as my father systematically dismantles his own life. First is the primary residence. The sprawling Gold Coast mansion purchased with money embezzled from Victor Thorne is put up as primary collateral. The deed is officially leveraged. Next comes the luxury automobile fleet. Elias demands the titles to the imported vehicles. Donovan agrees without a second of hesitation. He pledges the vintage sports cars, the luxury SUVs, and the armored executive sedans. Everything is added to the collateral pool. Finally, Elias demands the remaining equity in the family holding company itself. He requires Donovan and Sylvia to pledge their controlling shares of their own real estate firm. They are betting the entire foundation of their 30-year existence on a phantom Swiss buyer who does not exist. Penelope interjects, her voice shrill and panicked. She begs her father to sign the papers immediately. She is terrified of DeAndre's blackmail threat. She demands that they secure the cash right now to pay off her husband and save her lavish lifestyle. She does not care that her parents are signing away their home and their business. She only cares about preserving her own socialite status and protecting her personal wealth. Elias unscrews the cap of a heavy gold fountain pen and places it on top of the contracts. Donovan stares at the pen for a fraction of a second. It is the exact same type of pen he used 30 years ago to forge the original loan documents that destroyed Victor. The poetic justice is absolute. He picks up the pen. I lean closer to the monitor, watching the security feed intently. I watch the dark ink flow onto the crisp white paper. He signs his name, authorizing the transfer of the Gold Coast mansion. He flips the page and signs away the luxury cars. He turns to the final document and signs away the holding company. He hands the pen to Sylvia. She hesitates. For a single moment, a flash of genuine terror crosses her face. She looks at the mountain of contracts, realizing they are betting their literal survival on a foreign entity they have never met. Penelope snaps at her, urging her to hurry. Sylvia swallows hard, grips the gold pen, and signs her name strictly next to Donovan's. Penelope grabs the pen last and signs the final guarantor documents, pledging her own trust fund as secondary collateral. The execution is complete. They have officially signed away their souls. I take another sip of black coffee, allowing the heat to ground me in the reality of the moment. They believe they have just survived the worst day of their lives. They believe they are walking out of that bank to pay off a blackmailer and step into a billion-dollar Swiss partnership. They do not know they just finalized their own absolute destruction. I watch Elias Sterling gather the signed contracts and lock them in his heavy desk drawer. The family stands up, shaking hands with the man who now legally owns everything they have ever touched. I reach forward and terminate the security feed. The monitor goes completely black. I swivel my leather chair toward the secondary workstation. The $20 million my parents just bled themselves dry to secure rests safely inside my impenetrable Swiss escrow account. They have pledged their entire existence to a phantom. Now it is time to deal with the blackmailer. DeAndre believes his extortion is functioning perfectly. He is sitting in his corner office waiting for the 5 o'clock deadline, assuming his terrified in-laws will deliver the cash to keep his fraudulent enterprise afloat. He will never see a single dime of it. I access the encrypted payload Gideon and I spent the last 48 hours compiling. It is a master file containing thousands of pages of raw, unassailable financial data. It maps the exact architecture of Vanguard Tech Solutions. It highlights the phantom user metrics, the fabricated revenue streams, the offshore shell companies, and the laundered real estate capital supplied by my parents. It is the complete anatomical breakdown of a massive, sophisticated Ponzi scheme. I open a highly secure, untraceable email client. I attach the master file. I begin populating the recipient list with surgical precision. The Enforcement Division of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Cybercrime Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the investigative desks at Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Times. I configure the automated delivery timer for exactly 8:59 in the morning, 1 minute before the opening bell on Wall Street. I hit send. I do not sleep. I remain in the subterranean vault, bathed in the cool blue light of the monitors, watching the digital clocks count down the remaining hours. Gideon stands by the coffee machine, silently handing me a fresh black cup at 8:30. We bring up the live ticker for Vanguard Tech Solutions on the primary screen. Currently, the stock trades at an inflated $84 a share. It is a towering monument of arrogant hype and stolen money. At 8:59, the payload deploys. At 9 o'clock, the opening bell rings. The financial news networks break their regular programming within exactly 3 minutes. The anchors stare at their teleprompters in visible shock as they read the breaking headlines live on the air. A massive federal whistleblower leak. A multi-billion-dollar tech fraud exposed. Vanguard Tech Solutions officially named as an active Ponzi scheme. I watch the stock ticker. It is a financial bloodbath. The algorithm does not simply dip or correct itself. It falls off a sheer vertical cliff. $84 drops to $40 in 60 seconds. Institutional investors, algorithmic trading bots, and retail shareholders trigger a catastrophic massive sell-off. There are absolutely no buyers. There is only pure, unadulterated market panic. The green line plunges straight downward, turning violently red. $30, $15, $4. By 9:15, the New York Stock Exchange officially halts trading on Vanguard Tech Solutions due to extreme unprecedented volatility. The stock is permanently frozen at 32 cents. DeAndre's multi-billion-dollar valuation has been completely incinerated in 15 minutes. Through my backdoor access to his corporate servers, I watch his internal communications network self-destruct. Institutional investors are sending furious legal threats. Board members are resigning via automated mass emails. The company bank accounts are suddenly and aggressively frozen by federal regulators. The $20 million he attempted to extort from my parents would not even cover a fraction of the margin calls currently executing against his firm. DeAndre is watching the exact same screens. He does not attempt to call a press conference. He does not try to formulate a public relations defense. He does not even call Penelope to explain the ruin he just brought upon their household. He does exactly what a coward does. He runs. I switch my monitor to track the GPS signal on his personal cellular device. He has fled his downtown headquarters. The blinking red dot shows him speeding recklessly down Interstate 90, heading straight toward Midway International Airport. I access the flight manifests for the private charter terminals. He has hastily booked a Gulfstream jet bound for a non-extradition jurisdiction in South America. He paid triple the standard rate in cash. He thinks he can outrun the blast radius. He is entirely wrong. I tap into the closed-circuit security cameras at the Midway Private Aviation tarmac. The high-definition feed is crystal clear. DeAndre's black SUV tears through the security gate, ignoring the attendant, and screeches to a violent halt next to the idling Gulfstream. The jet engines are already whining, preparing for immediate takeoff. DeAndre kicks his car door open. He is clutching a heavy leather duffel bag stuffed to the breaking point with whatever physical cash and offshore hardware he could grab from his hidden safe. He sprints frantically toward the boarding stairs, his expensive suit jacket flapping in the wind. He makes it exactly 3 steps. A fleet of unmarked black Subarus converges on the tarmac from all directions, completely boxing in the private jet. The tires smoke against the concrete as heavily armed federal agents pour out of the vehicles. The FBI Cybercrime Task Force operates with terrifying efficiency. They swarm the boarding stairs, cutting off his only escape route. They draw their weapons and scream commands over the roar of the jet engines. DeAndre freezes. The heavy leather duffel bag slips from his trembling fingers and hits the concrete. The zipper bursts, spilling stacks of $100 bills onto the tarmac to be blown away by the exhaust. He drops to his knees, raising his hands high above his head in absolute defeat. Agents violently force him face down onto the concrete, wrenching his arms behind his back and snapping heavy steel handcuffs securely over his wrists. Simultaneously, a secondary feed on my monitor shows federal agents breaching the glass doors of the Vanguard Tech headquarters downtown. They are carrying heavy battering rams and stacking cardboard boxes to seize the corporate servers. They are dismantling his physical office just as ruthlessly as I dismantled his stock. I watch the live feed from the airport as 2 federal agents drag a weeping, terrified DeAndre toward an armored transport vehicle. His tailored suit is covered in jet fuel and tarmac dust. His arrogant smirk is gone, replaced by the sobbing realization of his absolute ruin. His empire is entirely ash. He is going to federal prison for the rest of his natural life. The blackmailer is dead. The tech prodigy is a convicted felon. My sister is officially married to an indicted fraudster, rendering her a social pariah in the circles she values more than oxygen. I take a long, slow sip of my coffee. Half the board is permanently cleared. I close the tracking windows and turn my full attention back to the true architects of this tragedy. I recalibrate the satellite uplinks and route my connection through the security mainframe of the Millennium Tower. Penelope and DeAndre occupy the entire top floor. The penthouse was purchased for $12 million in cash, washed directly through Donovan's corporate shell accounts. Now it belongs to the federal government. I bring up the interior hallway cameras. Penelope is sprinting frantically through her vaulted living room. She has seen the news. She is violently throwing designer clothes and velvet jewelry boxes into a pair of massive leather trunks. She thinks she is going to pack up her stolen wealth and check into the Four Seasons to wait out the storm. She is completely unaware that the Department of Justice moves faster than a panicked socialite. The heavy oak double doors of the penthouse do not just open, they are breached. 6 federal marshals wearing tactical vests spill into the marble foyer. The lead agent presents a federal asset forfeiture warrant. DeAndre's arrest triggered an immediate global freeze on every property, vehicle, and bank account tied to Vanguard Tech Solutions. Penelope shrieks at them. She demands they leave her home, invoking her father's name, as if it carries any weight against a federal indictment. The marshals are entirely unfazed. They inform her that the penthouse, the imported furniture, and the designer luggage she is currently packing are now the property of the United States government. They confiscate the trunks. They confiscate her diamond rings. They confiscate the keys to her imported sports car. She screams and thrashes, but 2 female agents take her strictly by the arms and march her out the door. The lobby cameras track her descent. The exterior street feeds capture the final humiliation. Penelope is physically deposited onto the cold Chicago pavement. The glass doors lock behind her. She is standing on the curb wearing a silk blouse and tennis shoes with absolutely nothing else to her name. No phone, no wallet, no car. Her golden existence has evaporated in a matter of minutes. She has to flag down a passing city cab and beg the driver to take her to the North Shore, promising that her wealthy father will pay the exorbitant fare upon arrival. I switch my monitor matrix to the internal security feeds of Donovan's mansion. The cameras in the grand foyer are active. The heavy mahogany front doors violently swing open. Penelope bursts into the house looking like a deranged hurricane. Her expensive silk blouse is wrinkled. Her hair is windblown and tangled. Her mascara tracks dark black lines down her cheeks. She bypasses the terrified maid, ignores the driver demanding his fare, and sprints directly toward Donovan's private study. Inside the study, Donovan and Sylvia are sitting by the fireplace sipping scotch. They look remarkably relaxed. They spent the entire morning congratulating themselves on securing the Swiss joint venture. They believe their financial crisis is officially averted. Penelope shatters their delusion the absolute second she crosses the threshold. She collapses onto the Persian rug, hysterically screaming that the federal government has seized her home. She shrieks that DeAndre was dragged off the airport tarmac in handcuffs and that every bank account attached to her name reads 0. Sylvia drops her crystal glass. It shatters against the hearth, sending shards flying across the room. Donovan leaps to his feet, his face twisting in genuine shock. Penelope does not wait for them to process the disaster. She grabs her father's suit jacket and begins demanding immediate salvation. She orders him to call the Swiss investors. She demands that he use the $40 million cash injection to hire the most ruthless defense attorneys in the country. She screams at him to wire her $5 million right this second so she can buy a new penthouse and escape the media circus. She looks at her father entirely expectant, completely certain that his endless well of stolen money will magically fix her ruined life. Donovan absorbs the hysterical demands and immediately shifts into his role as the untouchable patriarch. He tells Penelope to stop crying. He straightens his jacket and confidently declares that everything is under control. He reminds his wife and daughter that yesterday afternoon he secured the greatest financial victory of his career. He boasts that Aegis Alpine Holdings is backing them and that $40 million in liquid capital is sitting in an escrow account ready to be deployed. He walks over to his massive oak desk with the arrogant swagger of a man who believes he owns the world. I lean closer to my monitor, watching his every move. Donovan picks up his encrypted desk phone. He pulls up the contact sheet for the Geneva intermediaries who facilitated the joint venture. He dials the international number. I listen through the audio feed as the phone rings once. Then a harsh mechanical click echoes through the study. A pre-recorded automated voice announces that the number is disconnected and no longer in service. Donovan's swagger falters. He frowns and quickly dials the direct line to the managing director of Aegis Alpine. The exact same mechanical voice repeats the disconnection message. A cold, creeping dread begins to wash over his features. He drops the phone and yanks open his laptop. He frantically types in the web address for the European Investment Consortium. He hits enter. The screen instantly returns a bold white dead link message. The domain does not exist. Donovan is breathing heavily now. Sweat forms on his forehead. He opens his secure email client and pulls up the digitally signed contract he received yesterday. He hits reply on the thread demanding immediate communication and sends the message. 10 seconds later, a delivery failure notification bounces back. The server is permanently dead. The corporate entity known as Aegis Alpine Holdings has vanished from the face of the earth. Donovan stares blankly at the glowing screen. The horrific reality of his situation violently crashes down on him. The $40 million joint venture was a mirage. The Swiss billionaires were ghosts, and the $20 million he and Sylvia bled themselves dry to wire into that escrow account the money they secured by pledging their mansion, their cars, and their entire firm to a corrupt loan shark is gone. Completely, entirely gone. Sylvia watches her husband slowly collapse into his leather chair, clutching his chest. The silence in the study is absolute and terrifying. The panic sets in, not with a scream, but with the cold, suffocating realization that they have absolutely nothing left. The silence in the study does not last long. It is shattered by the sharp buzzing of the front gate intercom. I watch the exterior security feed as a sleek black courier van idles outside their wrought iron gates. The terrified maid buzzes the driver through. A man in a tailored gray suit steps out holding a thick, legally bound dossier. He does not knock. He hands the package directly to the maid and instructs her to deliver it to Donovan immediately. The internal camera captures the exact moment the heavy manila envelope lands on Donovan's desk. It bears the silver-embossed crest of Apex Holding headquarters. This is the parent corporation I established to quietly purchase the high-interest debt Donovan just signed over to Elias Sterling. The bridge loan was designed with a 0-hour default clause. The moment the Swiss escrow account vanished, the bank loan defaulted automatically. The papers inside the envelope are not a warning or a request for a meeting. They are a formal declaration of absolute foreclosure. The legal summons mandates that Donovan, Sylvia, and Penelope report to the downtown Apex skyscraper by noon for the immediate physical liquidation of their remaining assets. There is no grace period. There is no appeals process. Donovan reads the summons and his face cycles through a spectrum of violent emotions. He violently refuses to accept that he has been outplayed. He slams his fist against the mahogany desk, insisting that this is a simple clerical error, a predatory banking glitch that he can easily fix with a face-to-face negotiation. He orders Sylvia to fix her makeup and tells Penelope to stop hyperventilating. He genuinely believes he can march into this corporate headquarters, intimidate the faceless chief executive officer, and secure a 90-day extension. He still thinks he is the untouchable apex predator of the Chicago real estate market. They pile into the back of a remaining town car since the federal marshals already impounded Penelope's vehicles. The drive downtown is a suffocating, tense journey. I track their vehicle via satellite, watching it navigate the gridlocked streets toward the financial district. They are heading straight into the jaws of the trap. The Apex Holding skyscraper is a towering monolith of black glass and steel. It was designed to project absolute dominance and unyielding wealth. Donovan storms through the revolving front doors, attempting to project an aura of manufactured outrage. Sylvia walks closely behind him, hiding her mounting panic behind oversized designer sunglasses. Penelope is practically hyperventilating, clutching her mother's arm, looking around the cavernous high-tech lobby like a terrified animal. Donovan marches directly to the front security desk and demands to speak with the chief executive officer. He slams the legal summons onto the polished granite counter and threatens to unleash a fleet of corporate attorneys if he is not granted an immediate audience. The security chief does not flinch. He is one of my highly paid operatives. He simply checks a digital roster, nods once, and gestures toward a dedicated private elevator bank. He informs Donovan that the executive board has been expecting them. The elevator doors slide shut, sealing them inside a mirrored steel cage. The digital floor indicator climbs rapidly to the 70th floor, the executive level. The silence inside the elevator is crushing. Donovan straightens his tie, trying to summon the arrogance that built his stolen empire. Sylvia nervously adjusts her designer coat, smoothing out the invisible wrinkles of her impending poverty. Penelope wipes away a fresh tear, her breathing shallow and erratic. They are preparing to put on the performance of a lifetime to beg, threaten, and negotiate for their survival. I am waiting for them. The private elevator chimes softly, and the doors slide open to reveal a massive reception area leading directly to the primary boardroom. The heavy oak double doors stand slightly ajar. Donovan leads the charge, pushing the doors completely open, ready to unleash a barrage of corporate threats and legal bluster. He strides into the room, and the words instantly die in his throat. I am sitting at the head of a sprawling 30-foot mahogany table. The panoramic windows behind me frame the entire Chicago skyline, casting long, imposing shadows across the polished floor. Gideon stands perfectly still to my right, his hands clasped behind his back, projecting lethal, silent authority. 4 heavily armed private security contractors stand at the corners of the room wearing tactical suits and communication earpieces. The atmosphere in the room is freezing, absolute, and unforgiving. Donovan stops dead in his tracks. All the color instantly drains from his face, leaving him looking pale and hollow. Sylvia gasps loudly, her hands flying to her mouth in pure, unfiltered shock. Penelope stares at me, her tear-streaked face twisting in utter confusion. They are looking at the daughter they threw into the freezing streets 5 years ago. They are looking at the architect of their destruction. I do not smile. I do not offer a polite corporate greeting. I pick up my ceramic mug and take a slow, deliberate sip of black coffee. The silence stretches out heavy and suffocating, broken only by the quiet hum of the climate control system. I reach out and place my hand on the towering stack of defaulted mortgage contracts. These are the exact documents they eagerly signed in Elias Sterling's office less than 24 hours ago, pledging their home, their cars, and their company. I slide the heavy stack of papers smoothly down the center of the mahogany table. The thick dossier glides perfectly across the polished wood, stopping exactly at Donovan's fingertips. He stares down at his own signature. He looks back up at me, his eyes wide with the horrifying realization that the Swiss investors, the corrupt banker, and the forensic audit were all orchestrated by the exact same person. The trap is officially sprung. Donovan cannot tear his eyes away from the blue ink of his own signature. His breath catches in his throat, creating a sharp, wheezing sound that echoes across the silent boardroom. The realization violently short-circuits his brain. He looks at me, then at Gideon, then back at the defaulted mortgage contracts. His hands begin to tremble. The invincible armor of the Chicago real estate king dissolves into absolute dust. I lean forward slightly, resting my forearms on the cool, polished wood. I do not raise my voice. I speak with the clinical precision of a surgeon explaining a fatal diagnosis. I tell them exactly how their empire was dismantled. I explain that Aegis Alpine Holdings never existed. It was a digital phantom, a hollow shell company I fabricated using encrypted servers and offshore proxies. I tell Donovan that the Swiss billionaires he spent weeks desperately courting were nothing more than automated voice recordings and spoofed email addresses. I watch his jaw slacken as I explain the bridge loan. I reveal that I personally authorized the funding through Elias Sterling. I bought the corrupt banker's loyalty months ago. The second Donovan wired the $20 million to secure the European joint venture, that money dropped straight into an impenetrable escrow account under my exclusive control. He literally paid me to hand him his own foreclosure. Penelope lets out a high-pitched, wounded gasp. I shift my gaze to my sister. I tell her exactly why her husband is currently sitting in a federal interrogation room. I break down the timeline of Vanguard Tech Solutions. I explain how Gideon and I infiltrated DeAndre's corporate servers, how we mapped every fraudulent transaction, and how we compiled the master file of his multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. I tell her that I personally forwarded the unassailable evidence to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the FBI Cybercrime Task Force. I explain that I tracked his cell phone GPS as he sped toward the airport, and that I coordinated the federal raid on the tarmac. I incinerated his company, his freedom, and her lavish lifestyle in less than 24 hours. Sylvia completely breaks. The formidable matriarch of North Shore High Society, the woman who ruthlessly banished me to the freezing streets 5 years ago, shatters into a million jagged pieces. Her knees buckle. She drops directly onto the hardwood floor. Her expensive designer sunglasses fall from her face and clatter away. She crawls forward until her hands press against the heavy wooden base of the boardroom table. She begins to weep with violent, gasping sobs. Mascara streaks down her pale cheeks in dark, ruined lines. She begs for mercy. She looks up at me with terrified, pleading eyes and plays the only card she thinks she has left. She cries out that she is my mother. She screams that she carried me, that she raised me, that despite their flaws and their mistakes, we are bound by blood. She begs me to remember the holidays, the childhood birthdays, the family vacations. She pleads with me to show compassion to the woman who gave her life. She clasps her hands together, begging me not to leave them homeless and destitute on the streets. Donovan joins the pathetic display. The arrogant titan of industry lowers his head in absolute defeat. His shoulders sag entirely. He grips the edge of the mahogany table, his knuckles turning white as he begs for forgiveness. He tells me that I have proven my worth. He praises my ruthlessness, my staggering intellect, and my flawless execution of this hostile corporate takeover. He promises to step down immediately. He offers to sign over the firm legally and publicly without a fight. He promises to make me the undisputed head of the family, the sole heir to the entire legacy, if I just tear up the foreclosure documents. He is willing to surrender his crown to bow to his discarded daughter just to keep a roof over his head. I remain perfectly seated. I do not blink. I do not offer a single shred of sympathy or hesitation. Their tears are entirely meaningless to me. Their begging sounds like static. I reach out and tap the digital console embedded in the center of the boardroom table. The heavy mechanical blinds automatically lower over the panoramic windows, plunging the room into twilight. I press a second button. A hidden high-fidelity sound system engages. The room is instantly filled with the crisp, clear audio of a recorded conversation. It is the voice of Victor Thorne. Donovan stiffens as if he has been electrocuted. Sylvia's sobbing instantly chokes off, replaced by the suffocating silence of absolute exposure. The audio recording echoes off the boardroom walls, outlining the exact anatomical details of the crime they committed 30 years ago. Victor Thorne's voice methodically details how Donovan and Sylvia orchestrated the original hostile takeover. He details how they stole the foundational patents, how they forged the incorporation documents, and how they systematically destroyed the true original architects of the empire. The recording provides dates, banking routing numbers, and explicit unredacted confessions of their foundational theft. The color completely drains from my parents' faces. They are looking at a ghost. They realize in this paralyzing moment that I am not just a scorned daughter seeking petty revenge for being kicked out of the house. I have unearthed the buried skeleton of their entire existence. I have found the original sin that funded their mansions, their cars, and their elite social standing. I press the console and stop the recording. The silence slams back into the room, heavier and more oppressive than before. I look down at my pathetic weeping parents and my trembling sister. I tell them that I did not ruin them. I tell them that I did not destroy their legacy. I state with absolute ironclad certainty that I simply reclaimed stolen property. The empire never belonged to them. They were merely keeping my seat warm, and their lease has officially expired. I slide my hand across the smooth mahogany surface and withdraw a crisp white folder from beneath the stack of defaulted mortgage contracts. The leather executive chair creaks softly as I sit back, observing the absolute devastation radiating from the three people across from me. My parents remain frozen in their posture of total defeat, unable to fully comprehend the gravity of their sins laid bare in the quiet boardroom. I toss the folder onto the table. It lands with a heavy, authoritative thud, perfectly aligned with Donovan's trembling hands. He stares at it as if it were a live, explosive device. I instruct him to open it. He fumbles with the thick paper, lifting the cover to reveal a single legally binding document bearing the seal of the state of Illinois and the signature of a federal judge. It is an expedited writ of possession. I explain the exact parameters of the document with icy surgical clarity. The sprawling North Shore mansion, the sprawling estate they have used for decades as the ultimate symbol of their stolen prestige, is officially my property. I hold the deed. I hold the equity. I hold the keys to the heavy front doors. I lean forward, making sure my eyes lock onto Donovan's hollow, terrified gaze. I tell them they have exactly 48 hours to completely vacate the premises. They are allowed to take personal clothing, basic toiletries, and absolutely nothing else. Every piece of imported Italian furniture, every piece of fine modern art, the crystal chandeliers hanging in the foyer, and the silver cutlery in the dining room all belong to Apex Holding. If they attempt to sell, hide, or destroy a single item before they leave, the federal marshals will arrest them for felony theft of corporate assets. The deadline is absolute and non-negotiable. In exactly 48 hours, the exterior locks will be changed, the biometric security codes will be wiped, and any unauthorized personnel remaining on the property will be arrested for criminal trespassing. Penelope finally shatters the heavy, suffocating silence. She stops weeping and begins to scream. It is a shrill, hysterical sound of a spoiled, entitled child, realizing that the adults can no longer fix her broken reality. She slams her hands against the mahogany table, her knuckles turning white, her face twisted in pure, panicked desperation. She screams that they have absolutely nowhere to go. She shrieks that her bank accounts are completely frozen, her husband is sitting in a federal holding cell, and her platinum credit cards are declining every single transaction. She demands to know where they are supposed to sleep tonight, where they are supposed to eat, how they are supposed to survive this nightmare. She looks at me, expecting the familial bond to miraculously revive itself in the face of her absolute destitution. I look at her tear-streaked face and feel nothing but cold, absolute indifference. I tilt my head slightly, letting the heavy silence stretch before delivering my response. I tell her to try the parking lot at Walmart. I lean back in my chair and add that I hear it is particularly bracing in the rain. The words hang in the air, sharp and lethal. They are the exact same words Sylvia spat at me 5 years ago when she and Donovan threw me out into a freezing Chicago downpour with nothing but a trash bag of my clothes and $20 to my name. The color completely drains from Sylvia's face as she recognizes her own vicious quote thrown directly back at her. The memory strikes her with the force of a physical blow. She realizes in this crushing moment that every single ounce of their current suffering is a direct mirror reflection of the cruelty they inflicted upon me. They built their entire lives on a foundation of ruthless arrogance, and now they are drowning in it. I do not raise my voice. I simply state that their eviction is final, and this meeting is permanently concluded. I give a brief silent nod to Gideon. He steps forward, signaling the armed security contractors standing in the corners of the room. They move with terrifying militaristic efficiency, stepping directly behind Donovan, Sylvia, and Penelope. The guards do not ask them to politely leave. They physically grip their arms, pulling them up from the leather chairs and marching them away from the boardroom table. Donovan stumbles, his legs barely supporting his own weight, his eyes staring blankly at the floor. Sylvia sobs uncontrollably, covering her face with her trembling hands, unable to look at me as she is dragged away. Penelope continues to shriek, throwing a violent tantrum all the way out the heavy oak doors. The thick boardroom doors swing shut, sealing them out of my world forever. I stand up from the table. The room is perfectly quiet again. I walk slowly toward the panoramic windows, the automated blinds rising to reveal the sprawling, magnificent Chicago skyline. Far below on the gray city pavement, I watch the tiny figures of my former family being unceremoniously ejected from the glass lobby by my private security team. They huddle together on the cold concrete, completely stripped of their wealth, their status, and their stolen legacy. They are just three broke, desperate people stepping into the harsh, unforgiving reality of absolute poverty. I turn my back to the glass window. I walk over to my laptop and pull up my encrypted digital console one last time. I access the secure offshore ledger and initiate a final wire transfer. The remaining $10,000 from the liquidated Vanguard Tech accounts is routed directly into an anonymous charitable fund dedicated to supporting young victims of corporate fraud. The transfer completes with a soft digital chime. I pull up the heavily encrypted master file containing Victor Thorne's evidence, the blueprints of their decades-old crimes, and the entire architecture of my revenge. I execute the permanent deletion protocol. The ghosts of the past are finally put to rest. The board is cleared. The game is entirely over. My empire is absolute, and my peace is permanent. Sloane's calculated triumph over her corrupt family delivers a powerful lesson: arrogance and cruelty are ultimately self-defeating. Donovan and Sylvia built an empire on theft and entitlement, believing their wealth made them untouchable. However, true power does not lie in stolen legacy or sheer ruthlessness, but in patient, meticulous resilience. Sloane transformed her painful eviction into the absolute foundation for her own unassailable strength, proving that karma often arrives meticulously dressed as unyielding consequence. We must always remember that genuine integrity outlasts deceit. Share the greatest lesson you have learned from surviving toxic family environments, and please comment down below.